Chapter 591. On the other side. Wu Qin was a little more vigilant when he looked around. He snorted coldly and chased after the power of darkness. At this time, he came to a shabby room. Looking at the energy surging around him in the shabby room, he said coldly, "Come on." Just as he said that, then, he heard a voice coming from behind him, "You really chased after me. That's great. Then, let me kill you right here. I'll take your body and become a real human." Dustless turned his head and looked over. He couldn't help but be stunned. That was a person with only half a face. Half of that person's face was that of a human, while the other half had a disgusting appearance of boiling flesh and blood, as if it had been boiled alive. He was 1.9 meters tall, with a saber hanging from his waist and a hideous ghost armor on his body. His appearance made people feel nauseous and disgusted. Dustless looked at the man in front of him and said indifferently, "Who are you? I've never seen you before." After hearing this, the man's ugly and disgusting face showed a cold smile and said, "You don't need to know who I am. You only need to know that I'll take your body and soul and become a real powerful human. I'll become a god." Dustless felt strange. Why did this man's words not make sense? It was inexplicable. At this moment, the man laughed loudly. He suddenly pulled out his saber and slashed directly at Dustless. Dustless saw the man's saber slashing at him. He snorted and instantly activated the lightning armor. He flew back and the saber slashed at the air. Dustless pulled out his saber in an instant. The saber was covered with a thick heavenly curse thousand birds. The heavenly curse thousand birds released a shocking cry at that moment. It rushed forward and slashed at the man. The man's saber blocked it in an instant. The saber and the spear collided, and sparks flew. However, the energy on his body was able to completely isolate him. Dustless's face was slightly surprised. He narrowed his eyes and said curiously, "I didn't expect you to be able to do this. I really don't know how you did it, but I'm very curious." Just as he said this, the man said coldly, "Don't be curious. I'm the devil in your heart. You just accidentally released it. So, go to hell." After hearing this, Dustless was even more puzzled. Then, he saw the man suddenly increase his strength and directly pushed Dustless away. Dustless landed on the ground. When he stood firmly, he snorted. Energy surged. He took a deep breath and formed a seal with one hand. He snorted coldly. He narrowed his eyes, took a deep breath, and suddenly exhaled. Fire escape, grand fireball. A huge fireball was spat out from his mouth. It directly caused the surroundings in the room to burn. However, he only felt a cold ice power rising in an instant. An incomparably oppressive cold ice power appeared on the man's body, instantly causing the temperature to drop. At the same time, the fireball was split open by his saber in an instant. He looked coldly at Dustless and said, "With your strength, you can't kill me. Moreover, you can only supply me with energy." After he finished speaking, he laughed loudly. He held the saber in his hand, jumped up, and slashed at Dustless. Dustless felt the saber coming at him again. He snorted coldly. His expression changed again and again. He took a deep breath and gently stepped back. Energy gathered in his hand. Suddenly, the power of chi magic appeared in his hand. He shouted loudly, "Demons, ghosts, leave." As soon as he finished speaking, countless talismans appeared in his palm. He slammed his palm forward. The sound of thunder exploding rang out, and the powerful force immediately sent that terrifying person flying. He fell to the ground, and at the same time, there was a burnt stench on his body. The man used his saber to support his body and quickly stood up. His face was filled with disbelief. He said in surprise, "Why is it like this? It shouldn't be. How can you do this? After Dustless heard this, he snorted coldly and said with a faint smile, "What can't I do? Do you really think I'm a fool? Can't you see? Your body has an extremely strong smell of hell, and it also has the smell of my body. I can guess that you're the ghost of Luoxing sect." After hearing this, the man's face suddenly changed. He couldn't help but reveal a deep surprise in his eyes. He said, "How did you?" Dustless shook his head and sighed. He said with a helpless face, "You're really too stupid. You want to go against your master. I know you're not convinced, but your strength is too weak. Moreover, your thinking is too immature. You dare to fight with me? You must be joking with me." After saying this, he gently walked forward. At this moment, the energy in his hand surged. The 5 elemental energy gathered on his 5 fingers. The ghost of Luoxing sect didn't dare to resist and was directly hit in the head. The 5 elemental energy on Dustless's 5 fingers entered the body of the ghost of Luoxing sect. Suddenly, his hand was like a tiger's claw, and he clenched it. The ghost of Rashomon let out a loud cry, and its entire body dispersed, turning into countless dark energy that merged into Dustless's body. At this time, Dustless coldly snorted. He shook off the blood on his hand and directly sealed the energy into his body. Of course, he used the power of chi magic. He coldly snorted and said, "I didn't expect to be able to attract such a bloody evil ghost. This is really interesting." He knew that there was another ghost of Luoxing sect. Because he summoned 3 Luoxing sects, there should be another one that ran out. Thinking like this, at this moment, in another final battlefield, everyone had already faced the final powerhouse, Ghost Dancer Wu Huai. The dancer ghost Wu Xie's face was cold and ferocious. His eyes were full of killing intent. When he looked at everyone, he was full of cold killing intent. He coldly said, "Who do you think you are? You think you can kill me? That's impossible. No one can kill me. I'm immortal." He had been fighting with everyone for a long time. At the same time, he was a little tired, but the dark energy in his body forced him to endure. Chapter 592. Mi Duzi, who was in front of him, was the first to attack. She roared, "You bastard, go and die. A scourge like you should die quickly." After she finished speaking, a huge amount of dragon energy condensed in her hand. The moment the huge dragon energy appeared in her hand, she punched out. A disdainful smile appeared on Onishi's face. Dark energy surged on his body. Although his shirt was completely torn apart, revealing his strong muscles, he calmly waved his hand. Immediately, dark energy surged out. Dark blood hand. Instantly, an incomparably huge dark blood demon hand appeared on the ground. That was to stop the enormous dragon chi. As a result, Mi Duzi was blocked, and she was even pushed back by a powerful aura. When Tan Xiro heard that his sister's attack was thwarted, he coldly snorted and jumped up. At the same time, the blade in his hand spun and emitted light. "I won't forgive you." After saying that, he immediately slashed down with his blade. The blade carried a violent splash as it slashed down. After it slashed down, it instantly split the blood hand into 2. However, it was useless. More apprentices were born beside the crowd. One after another, dark soldiers were born. The dark soldiers immediately charged towards the crowd, causing a huge disturbance to the crowd. When Tan Xiro saw the dark soldiers, he clenched his teeth and hurriedly retreated while protecting the crowd. At this moment, Tomioka Yoshiaki clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. His eyes slightly narrowed as he said, "It seems that this guy is determined to kill all of us here." Tan Xiro also nodded and took a deep breath. He was already prepared to sacrifice himself, but the prerequisite was that he must defeat the enemy. He clenched his teeth and said, "No, we must quickly defeat him. If we continue to waste time like this, we won't have a good ending." At this moment, Medusa was also slightly affected. The dark energy caused her eyes to become sharper. She hurriedly said, "The dark energy on this guy's body can have a slight effect on our strength." Just as she said that, Purgatory Xing Shou Lang nodded. After killing the two darkness soldiers, he discovered that the energy in his body had become even more irritable and difficult to control. He couldn't help but have a headache as he said, "Indeed, it is indeed difficult to control." At this moment, Undying Kawa, who was already incomparably wild, was completely indifferent. He held the dark green blade in his hand and jumped left and right. He had already killed a dozen dark soldiers. However, he knew that these dark soldiers were created. At most, they would be consumed. But for him, it would be even more. At this moment, Honeydew Temple's Mealy could not help but frown. Her eyes revealed a pondering look as she said, "This is even more troublesome. This guy seems to have an endless number of soldiers." At this moment, outside the final battle gate, my wife, Shan Yi, couldn't help but have a solemn expression on her face. Looking at her senior brother who had completely fallen, she felt a little helpless. My wife Shan Yi took a deep breath and said, "Do we really have to guard this gate?" Her senior brother, Ling Yu, revealed a malevolent expression. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold disdain. He looked at my wife Shan Yi with a smile and said with cold mockery, "Aren't you the same as me now? I've become a ghost and you've become neither human nor ghost. It's really disgusting. You were already very disgusting before. Now that you've become like this, it's really disdainful." My wife Shan Yi's words to her senior brother were completely unfounded. Ling Yu took a deep breath and flew back 2 or 3 steps. Looking at the gate that his senior brother was guarding, he knew that it was the final battle gate. If he didn't go in and participate, then what was the point? How could he help everyone? With this thought in mind, he became more and more determined. He tightly gripped the 1.5-meter-long tachi in his hand. You made him assume the posture of drawing his sword and slashing. He said coldly, "Is that all? You can only use the first form. It's simply laughable." My wife Shan Yi only said indifferently, "I might only use one move, and that's the move to kill you. I won't lose to you." Ling Yu didn't have any intention of being polite. He directly rushed towards my wife Shan Yi in an instant. The moment he got close, a soft voice came out of his mouth. "Thunder Breath Second Form, Rice Soul." A powerful and surging power of thunder and lightning instantly erupted. My wife Shan Yi directly used the tachi in her hand to block it and was forced back a dozen steps. He wasn't discouraged. Instead, he was sensing how strong his senior brother had become. Sure enough, he had become very strong. However, he wasn't discouraged. He only took a deep breath and said indifferently, "You've become a lot stronger, but to me, you're still not strong enough. You're still not strong enough." Ling Yu was a bit angry. He gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. His eyes slightly narrowed as he coldly said, "Who do you think you are? You think you can teach me a lesson like that old man? Even if that old man is already dead, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are?" When he said this, he angered Shan Yi even more. However, it still allowed him to remain calm. My wife Shan Yi took a deep breath and put away the tachi again. At the same time, her tears deepened and the mark on her face became even more serious. She said, "Although you're very strong, although you've learned more moves than me, and have powerful ghost energy and a very dense dark energy, even so, evil can't win against good. I definitely won't lose to someone like you." When he said this, it contained his acknowledgement of himself, but at the same time, it also contained his disdain for his fallen senior brother. His eyes revealed a bit of relief. In the past, he was despised by his senior brother, but he didn't dare to resist. He didn't understand why it was like that. Now that she thought about it, perhaps she was a bit jealous. Perhaps she was like a scoundrel who just wanted to find someone to vent her anger on. My wife Shawnee understood and said indifferently, "I will kill you here and wash away Master's humiliation. I will take back all of the thunder breath." When she said this, she coldly turned around and looked at Ling Yu. Chapter 593. When Yu heard this, he couldn't help but sneer. His eyes carried a bit of disdain as he laughed out loud. "You think you can defeat me with your strength? Even." My wife Shawnee wasn't good with words and he didn't plan on using words to speak. It was the stance of the thunderbolt flash. Immediately after, he took a deep breath and lowered his head. There was only a bit of pity in his eyes, but after he slowly closed them, there was no longer any pity. Instead, a shocking murderous aura erupted from his body. Yu's eyes were full of surprise. He couldn't help but be startled. There was a strange feeling in his eyes. This junior brother seemed to have become a lot stronger. Just as he thought of this, he immediately shook his head, thinking that he had seen wrongly. However, he immediately snorted coldly, took a deep breath, and coldly swung his blade. Immediately, an astonishing ghost force erupted from his body. He coldly said, "Who do you think you are? You think you can defeat me? Even that old man might not be my match right now." My wife Shawnee heard about the master and indifferently said, "Master is already dead." Yu hesitated for a moment when he heard this, but he quickly laughed coldly and said, "Isn't it pretty good? He was so old and should have died long ago. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to learn." My wife Shawnee coldly said, "You already have a lot. Unfortunately, you don't know how to cherish it. You only want more, that's all." Yu was startled after hearing this. There was a bit of surprise in his eyes and he didn't understand what his junior brother wanted to say. However, at this moment, he felt a vigorous murderous aura erupt. He couldn't help but widen his eyes and take a deep breath. Yu made his move. Thunder Breath 6th Form, Thunderous Thunder Explosion. After he finished speaking, he directly made his move, but he was too slow. He had become a ghost and his physical fitness had greatly improved. Moreover, he had obtained a portion of the power of darkness. However, he was still too slow, too slow. My wife Shawnee's speed was unimaginably fast. Poochie! A sound rang out. My wife Shawnee's speed was so fast that it was unbelievable. She immediately appeared behind Yu. He slowly put away the knife and said coldly, "You have already lost." Yu lowered his head and looked down. There was a very long, slanted cut from his chest to his stomach. The wound ran through his entire body. He knelt down, his eyes filled with fear. When he turned his head, my wife, Shawnee, coldly said the name of the move just now, Breath of Thunder, 8th Form, Death Song. After saying that, suddenly, blood gushed out from the Lantern District like a beautiful flower. My wife Shawnee's face was as cold as ice. There was no change at all. There was only a cold murderous aura on his face. Facing the murderer who killed his master, he no longer had any mercy. Even if it was his senior brother, so what? Killing the murderer was what he had to do. As for Yu, he directly fell to the ground. His body turned into a faint energy that dissipated, and his soul also rose into the sky in confusion. Just as my wife, Shawnee, pushed open the door to the final battlefield, two strange voices sounded from behind. "Are you going in? The two of us have no intention of letting you in." My wife, Shawnee, turned around and saw the siblings. His expression became even colder as he said coldly, "So it's the two of you." The two siblings were naturally the prostitutes, Taro. Dancer Ghost's plan was to lure everyone into the final battlefield. Of course, after being lured in, no one could enter the final battlefield, and they would be the ones to stop the reinforcements. Inside, the dancing ghost demon would defeat everyone and devour them to become even stronger. Then, they walked out of the final battlefield and killed all the reinforcements. The ones who stopped the reinforcements before that were the siblings. My wife, Shawn-E, looked at the brother and sister in front of her. She naturally knew that it would be very difficult for her to deal with 2 first-quarter moons. However, he knew that he had to kill these 2 people. He didn't want to let any ghost go. She took a stance and her expression became very cold. At this moment, Fallen Concubine laughed loudly. Her face revealed a disdainful sneer as she said, "Who do you think we are? Do you think we will be easily defeated by you? Are you the same as your useless senior brother?" Just as she finished speaking, the belts on her waist instantly moved. Super 8 belt slash. Suddenly, several belts directly turned into wide blades and launched a fierce attack towards my wife, Shawn-E. My wife, Shawn-E, jumped and at the same time, made a move. He didn't know any other Thunder Breath forms, except for the Thunderbolt Flash that he learned from his master. Since then, he had never learned any other moves. However, he created his own move because he knew that if he couldn't learn any other moves, he could only desperately create one. This was him. My wife, Shawn-E. The blade was instantly unsheathed. The 1.5-meter-long blade was held with both hands and drew a big circle in the blink of an eye. My wife, Shawn-E's eyes widened. In an instant, she loudly shouted, "Thunder Breath, 9 form, full moon thunder." As soon as his words fell, countless bolts of lightning appeared beside him, directly shattering all the cloth blades that were flying over. Fallen Concubine received a terrifying power and couldn't help but be shocked. She quickly retreated. However, my wife, Shawn-E, who was in mid-air, instantly grasped her retreating speed. My wife, Shawn-E's waist was full of lightning flashing. She loudly shouted, "Thunder Breath form, Thunderbolt Flash." Then, in that instant, a yellow light suddenly fell from the sky, and the broadsword directly slashed towards Fallen Concubine. Fallen Concubine Street was shocked. However, immediately after, they heard a cold and strange voice. "You want to kill my sister? You didn't ask me. You want to kill people but you didn't ask me." The prostitute, Taro, really cared for his sister. In an instant, she flashed and took out 2 sickles. In an instant, she blocked the large blade and pushed it upwards. My wife, Shawn-E, was pushed away. She crashed twice in mid-air before landing on the ground. However, the blade had already returned to its scabbard. At the same time, she half knelt on the ground, her hand holding the hilt. Chapter 594. Surd's expression froze. He had never seen such a crazed Blackbeard. Blackbeard's eyes glowed with a dim light, and his sinister smile was no longer as amiable as before. He had abandoned his human skin and was no different from an evil and filthy demon. The strange smile on the corner of his mouth made Thatch instinctively feel bad, and he stepped back subconsciously. Poochie. There was a sharp pain in his abdomen, and his face was as pale as paper. His eyes were wide open as he looked at the blunt weapon inserted into his abdomen. The one holding him was his most trusted Titch. His pupils were enlarged several times. Apparently, Thatch was extremely surprised by Blackbeard's actions. He was in a trance, and his empty eyes seemed to think that this was a dream. What a stupid idiot. Such a character can be a captain. Whitebeard pirates. It seems that it's only a matter of time before you die. His cold eyes were full of viciousness and fierceness. Blackbeard's killing intent soared. Seeing that Thatch was still immersed in his fantasy, the corner of his mouth rose into a mocking smile. His fierce eyes were extremely cruel, and the blunt weapon in his hand began to rotate. Kaka. The jagged blunt weapon rotated in Thatch's abdominal cavity, crushing all his organs, and the violent tingling instantly surged all over his body. Thatch grimaced in pain. At the same time, he returned to his senses and glared at Blackbeard, wishing he could perish together with him. "Why are you looking at me like this? You know, we are good brothers." Ha ha ha. Even though he tried his best to suppress his laughter, in the end, Blackbeard could not help but laugh out loud. His ugly body trembled rhythmically because of his unbridled laughter. His stubble-covered belly swayed back and forth, dazzling everyone's eyes. It seems that what that guy said is true. Seeing Blackbeard laughing so wildly, Thatch immediately understood the reason and blamed himself. If he hadn't listened to Blackbeard's temptation, he wouldn't have fallen into such a miserable situation. The members of the Whitebeard pirates on the island all died because of his recklessness. Kha. Sir, it's because you're too benevolent that I took the initiative to contact you because I saw this. If you were half as smart as Marco and the others, my scheme wouldn't have succeeded. Kha. His repressed emotions were finally released. His arrogant and wild laughter rang out continuously. Blackbeard unscrupulously vented the depression and annoyance that had accumulated in his heart for many years. Blackbeard clearly had the strength comparable to Red Hair Shanks, one of the four emperors, but he was secretly Whitebeard's underling. It would be strange if Blackbeard was not depressed. Bang! Witnessing Blackbeard's carelessness, Sirt's fist was covered with armament hockey and mobilized the remaining strength of his whole body and blasted towards Blackbeard's face. People would often erupt with extraordinary potential when they were in a life-and-death situation. Sirt was currently like this. His full-strength punch had sent Blackbeard, who was far stronger than him, flying. Ouch, it hurts so much. Maldiv***, I'm going to chop you into pieces today, grind your bones and scatter your ashes before throwing them into the sea to feed the sea kings. Rolling on the ground in a sorry state, Blackbeard covered his nose with his rough hands. He glared at Sirt and roared in a sharp voice. The hatred in his words was so deep that he wanted to peel Sirt's skin and break his bones. Damn you! Holding his blood-stained teeth in both hands, Blackbeard's old face twitched with anger. When he dueled with Red Hair, he accidentally lost a few teeth. Now he was caught off guard by Sirt's sneak attack and lost several teeth. There were only a few teeth left in his mouth. In the future, he didn't need to eat with his teeth. He could just swallow directly. Anyway, he was going to lose his teeth soon. Arrogance is your biggest shortcoming. It doesn't matter if you kill me. You will suffer in the future, Titch. Sirt laughed as he knelt on the ground. Looking at Blackbeard with his mouth full of blood, Sirt was unwilling, but there was nothing he could do. It was not that he was incompetent, but that Blackbeard, a deep-sea shark, hid too deep. When he showed his fangs, it was already too late. Ha ha ha. Don't feel lonely. It won't be long before Whitebeard, that old bastard, follows you into hell. Ha ha ha, Blackbeard laughed hysterically with red eyes. How could he expect him to be grateful? What kind of idiotic joke was this? He had worked for Whitebeard for more than 10 years, but Whitebeard had not paid him. Wiping the blood off the corner of his mouth, Blackbeard felt relieved. Anyway, he was just bitten by a dying mad dog. There was no need to run over and bite him again. You are indebted to my father. How could you do such a shameless thing? Only animals would do such a thing. How could you do it? Sirt roared with all his strength as his vitality faded away. His tone was full of hatred. In Blackbeard's ears, it was all bark and no bite. It only showed that he was more vulnerable. Why did you come here? I thought I could continue to mock you, you trash. It seems that you won't be alive to enjoy it. What a pity. Seeing that Serd had gradually closed his eyes and his vitality was severely depleted to the point where it was almost negligible, Blackbeard snorted unhappily. Just as he was about to find someone to confide in, his only audience had already died. One could imagine the depression in his heart. When I get the dark fruit, the 4 seas and the new world, ah no, the whole world will be mine. There were no survivors on the island. Only Blackbeard, who was waving his arms around, did not feel the slightest bit of discomfort towards the corpses around him. The killing intent that filled him fused into one and instead increased his arrogance. His entire being was emitting a thick evil aura. At the same time, the figure hiding in the dark rushed toward Blackbeard at an incredible speed. It was beyond the range of human eyes. Chapter 595. Blackbeard's body was swollen, his ugly face was full of indifference, his huge fist was raised high, and when he was about to completely solve Serd, he was shocked. Under the black night sky in front of him, a black afterimage rushed towards him. The speed was as fast as lightning, beyond human imagination, and the strange running posture had never been seen before. Is this a ghost or a human? Blackbeard's tone was surprised and uncertain. It was the first time in his life that he had seen such a strange running posture. His rough big hand subconsciously rubbed his eyes, thinking it was an illusion. When he opened his eyes again, his black pupils dilated, trying to see the ghostly figure. A strong wind suddenly blew in front of him, and the afterimage turned into reality, and a cold corpse appeared in front of him. Blackbeard didn't wake up at all. The strange figure in front of him couldn't help but be shocked. Under the perception of observation hockey, he clearly noticed that this figure was completely a dead body that had been given the ability to move. There was no breath, no heartbeat, no emotions, and the body had clear cracks similar to pottery. It was completely a zombie being used. It was the first time that Blackbeard had encountered such a scene. The lifeless zombie didn't care about Blackbeard. His feet slammed on the ground and he jumped up and instantly jumped into the sky. He clenched his fist and mercilessly greeted Blackbeard's ugly face. Looking down on me. Looking for death. Blackbeard lost his rationality and roared. His entire body shook and his fleshy skin was replaced by a shiny black color, forming an indestructible skin surface. Armament hockey hardening. With his order, his whole body turned into steel skin. Blackbeard looked contemptuously at the attacking shadow and entered the state of armament hockey. His ugly face was even more unbearable to look at. Boom! A heavy punch hit Blackbeard's old face and only pushed him back a few steps. It couldn't hurt him at all. This guy's armament hockey has reached the realm of perfection. It's really a fragile fist, with this. Ouch, it hurts. Before Blackbeard could be proud, the shadow rose again, and the speed was 3 points faster than before, and the strength was the same. Blackbeard's naked eye didn't even catch the trajectory of the movement and he was easily knocked away. Pfff, smelly blood spurted out from Blackbeard's mouth. The blood dyed the ground red and mixed with some indistinct particles. Looking closely, it was Blackbeard's teeth that had fallen out. Looking as far as the eye could see, Blackbeard's upper jaw had lost almost half of his teeth, and the lower jaw's teeth were nearly all gone. In the future, when he ate, he would probably only be able to swallow. Ha! Titch, this looks good on you. Serd suddenly opened his eyes and laughed wildly as he saw Blackbeard's miserable appearance. His face regained its redness, and his previously soft and weak voice was now full of energy. The scene of Blackbeard being brutally beaten was the best medicine for him. This was the final radiance of the setting sun, and Serd would die soon. May I know your name? Serd asked respectfully as he looked at the figure in front of him. In this world where the strong are respected, the whole world is full of respect for the strong. Although most of the reason why Blackbeard's teeth were knocked out was due to his carelessness, the fact that he could force Blackbeard to retreat again and again showed that this person was extraordinary. Turning his head, Surd's eyes were dead and emotionless. After a little thought, he gave an ambiguous answer. The name is just a simple code name. Some people used to call me Uchiha Dushless, and later some people called me Royce South, and now my name is Uchiha Madara. Surd was stunned, and then his face was full of doubts and puzzlement. He seemed to have heard this hoarse and slightly magnetic voice before. Where the hell did you come from, bastard? Blackbeard, who got up from the ground, was so angry that he vomited blood. He clenched his fists, and his right hand subconsciously touched his lower jaw, but there were no teeth. The dead man's face was indifferent. His emotionless eyes looked down on everything. He was wearing red armor and black gloves. His long and messy black hair danced in the wind, looking wild and unruly. It was the former invincible Uchiha Madara. Looking at the vast world, looking at thousands of years of history, I'm afraid that only Blackbeard had his teeth knocked out one after another and reached the point of leaving his name in history. Uchiha Madara's consciousness has been erased, and now the person who replaced his consciousness is naturally the one who performed the Edo Tensei. In the whole world of pirates, only one person knows the Edo Tensei. Although Madara's consciousness has been erased, and his combat power has dropped to an unprecedented freezing point, but if I replace him, even if I can't kill Blackbeard, I can give him an unforgettable lesson. Dustless's eyes flashed with a hidden light, and he said confidently. Once the consciousness of a strong person who was reincarnated by the Edo Tensei is forcibly erased, his combat power will only plummet. This was the case when Orochimaru reincarnated the first Hokage. Because the consciousness of the corpse was erased, his strength was not even as good as the third Hokage, and he was finally sealed. Ninjutsu varies from person to person. Although they are all reincarnated by the Edo Tensei, Dustless is sure that he can surpass Orochimaru and Kabuto. At that time, Uchiha Madara's body was almost destroyed by Kaguya, and Dustless only kept a small number of physical cells. Therefore, the current Madara is too far away from his heyday. Although his body contains Dustless's own cells, his strength is not as good as before. If the whole body was there, Dustless would have already made Uchiha Madara into Tendo. However, it is only a matter of time to restore Madara's body. Although it is difficult to create a whole body with a small number of body cells, for Dustless, who has reached the peak of yin-yang release, creating a new him is just around the corner. At that time, Uchiha Madara will appear in the form of Tendo. Chapter 596. Blackbeard's eyes were locked on Uchiha Madara, who was controlled by Dustless, and then he looked at the broken teeth on the ground. His ferocious face was terrifying like a ghost, and his eyeballs were about to fall out. What's with that expression? How dare a dead man look at me like I'm looking down on a bug? Blackbeard's eyes were filled with killing intent. From Uchiha Madara's indifferent eyes, he was keenly aware of the contempt in his eyes. It was one thing to be despised by Surd, but now he was despised by a dead man. Blackbeard's grievance was self-evident. His chest felt suffocated, and the flames in his heart rose. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara, who was reincarnated by Dustless, still remained indifferent. His eyes were as calm as still water, full of desolation, as if he came from another time and space, incompatible with the world in front of him. An indescribable emotion quietly spread in his mind. This fellow's boldness of looking down on the common people as ants is not a pretense. He has real strength. Putting away the contempt in his heart, Blackbeard tensed up his nerves and said vigilantly. He never felt that a person's momentum could be so terrifying. He carefully looked at Uchiha Madara, who was holding his hands in front of him, and couldn't help but stretch out a sense of insignificance. The plain indifferent eyes remained calm, and the eyes that could be calm in the face of everything were deeply moving. The ambition hidden in the depths of his eyes was enough to swallow the whole world. Suddenly, he felt that the man in front of him, all living things should worship him. Bastard, where is this inexplicable oppression coming from? Blackbeard's old face was livid. Although he didn't want to admit it, but looking at Madara's eyes, he couldn't help but avoid and be full of fear. This is definitely not Houshiku's haki, but just his spirit when he was alive. Even after the fall, it is still preserved. It seems that when this guy was alive, his strength was definitely enough to be on par with that old man Whitebeard, or even better. I didn't expect there to be such a person in this world. A person's temperament will never lie. Even if time has decayed and obliterated Uchiha Madara, his peerless spirit was enough to make the world look up to him. Now, everything about Uchiha Madara's past was reversed by Dustless and restarted again. He returned from hell, and the shock he brought to the world was unparalleled. Different world, different identity, but he was still the peerless Uchiha Madara. Although you are a dead man, are you interested in being my subordinate? I can bring you back from the dead, and I can forget about the matter of you knocking out all my teeth. Otherwise... you'll have to bear the consequences. Blackbeard was worthy of being a peerless hero. He abandoned his previous grievances, and instead made empty promises to Ben controlled by Dustless. At the same time, his harsh tone, to tempt Madara, and also warning. Bring me back to life. A dabbler like you. The corners of his mouth curled up into a playful smile, and his frozen expression loosened. His words caused Blackbeard to choke and cough. He casually said in a soft voice, "Have you ever seen a divine dragon roaming the sky and a little snake crawling on the ground dancing together?" Hearing this, Blackbeard's face suddenly twitched, and he wanted to slap himself. It was stupid and ignorant to draw a dead man to his side. If that's the case, then die for me again. Blackbeard sneered and did not hesitate to pull out the gun from his waist and aimed at Madara's head. His cheeks flashed with cold light, and he did not hesitate to fire several shots in succession. Bang bang bang. A burst of white smoke came out of the muzzle, and then several powerful bullets burst out, aiming at Madara's head. How can this kind of old weapon hit me? Madara closed his eyes and shook his head. He easily turned his head to avoid the incoming bullets. His movements were simple and skillful, agile and at ease. His nonchalant appearance invisibly mocked Blackbeard's ignorant actions. There is one more, go to hell and die. As if he saw Madara's brain exploding, Blackbeard smiled cruelly and viciously. Naive. Madara's face was cold, and his closed eyes suddenly opened. Unlike before, the scene in his pupils changed dramatically, revealing the Scarlet Three-Tomo Sharingan. The bullet that moved extremely fast was as slow as a turtle crawling for a moment. He easily caught the bullet that was about to blow Madara's head, and then crushed it easily. This guy's eyesight can keep up with the speed of the bullet. Blackbeard swallowed his saliva and said incredulously. Predicting the trajectory of the bullet is very simple, and he can perceive it with his observation haki. But to see it with the human eye and catch it with his bare hands is a bit shocking. Is it because of those eyes? What an evil feeling. Blackbeard looked at Madara's eyes with a little panic, and said with a heavy depression. A black shadow swept out of thin air, and Blackbeard, who realized the danger of Madara's imagination, chose to make the first move. In the blink of an eye, Blackbeard appeared in front of Madara like a monster, and his iron fist covered with armament haki blasted toward him. This guy is still despicable. Dustless, who was secretly controlling Madara's consciousness, sneered again and again, and his scarlet eyes connected together, and the three tomo in the eye sockets were connected by a circular coil and turned into the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan, Kensusunu. The evil brilliance erupted, and the materialized chakra condensed and closed. Unlike Dustless's golden chakra, this chakra color is unique to dark blue, which is Madara's own power. Boom! Madara's fist fell on the giant skeleton, and his arms suddenly shook, and he immediately looked up at the dark blue light, and the scene reflected in his eyes was filled with blue. Insignificant, in addition to insignificant, there is only dust in the ocean, not worth mentioning. Looking at Blackbeard, who was close at hand, Madara raised his eyelids indifferently and looked at him with pity. His eyes were not as indifferent as before, but with sympathy, and then shook his head. It's too far, even if it's one step away, it's actually the end of the world. Chapter 597. Seeing that the blue light was as motionless as a mountain, no matter how much strength he exerted, Blackbeard hurriedly retreated, looking at the blue light covering the sky with a little fear. It seemed that it was not safe to retreat for more than 10 meters, and he retreated a few steps in succession before he was relieved. Covered by the evil light, Blackbeard had a sense of suffocation, and his breathing was abnormal. This oppression that he had never felt before was directly oppressive to Whitebeard. Kansusanu's vicissitudes of life made Blackbeard deeply moved. Every time he was shrouded by the light, his hair would tremble uncontrollably. Everyone said that he was evil, but the person in front of him was obviously the source of evil, a great villain above him. What the hell is this? Blackbeard exclaimed, with a subtle sharpness in his tone, which made people's ears numb. He had seen countless strange abilities with the Whitebeard pirates throughout his life, but this was the first time he had seen such a behemoth. The worst thing was that the giant's limbs were clearly uneven. It was obvious that he was not at his limit yet. Perhaps when he unfolds his complete state, he has exceeded the world's understanding of the concept of height. Blackbeard secretly guessed, his voice was very hoarse, with a hint of timidity. His eyes fell on Madara in Kansusanu. Seeing his indifferent eyes, the fear in Blackbeard's heart was swept away. Although Madara's eyes did not point directly at him, Blackbeard knew that he was despising him. Is it useful to retreat? Kansusanu's attack ignores the distance, there is no escape, it is useless to escape to the ends of the earth. The strong blue arm erupted with chakra, and a huge long sword suddenly emerged in it. The sword was rough, but it showed the powerful edge of the earth, which made people dare not underestimate it. Staring in the direction of Blackbeard, Madara did not hesitate to raise his sword. Whiz! The wind at the tip of the sword came out, and the awe-inspiring waves easily tore the surface of the ground like tearing paper, revealing the dark depths of the ground. Caw caw caw, the huge mouth swallowed Blackbeard, and the unstoppable posture made Blackbeard's face change greatly. Like a frightened rabbit, he fled in a hurry to avoid the annihilation of the crack. Blackbeard, who was defeated, could only die. Although I expected the numbers to drop, it's still beyond my imagination to drop to such an extent. Dustless, who secretly controlled Madara's consciousness, frowned and said with a little dissatisfaction in his tone. He could only sigh helplessly. This is the case with Edo Tensei. The flesh of the reincarnated person was especially important. Dustless only used a small number of cells, and the power could be imagined. The second was his own consciousness. Forcibly erasing Madara's consciousness had already reduced his level of strength. Kansusanu was obviously a mature form, but the power it could unleash was less than 1/10 of its original power. Even though its attack power was still extremely exaggerated and terrifying, it was a world of difference compared to its peak form. Both its attack power and defense power were the same. So, a sharp sound pierced through the air from behind. Then, a black shadow appeared out of thin air and smashed into Kansusanu's spine like a cannonball. Caw caw caw. A crisp cracking sound was heard as cracks appeared on the spine. Although the cracks were negligible, they continued to spread in all directions. This guy, he's very smart. The larger the creature, the more difficult it is to move. Blackbeard chose to attack from behind, which was a smart move. The back was the weakness of any creature. Hey! Isn't it still broken by me? Triumphant laughter resounded through the night sky, winking at Madara, and the appearance of the villain was extremely annoying. The current mature form of Kansusanu's power and defense are less than 1/10 of its original power. Maybe if Whitebeard came, he would have broken his defense with one punch. Madara's face was expressionless, and at the same time, there was a faint smile on his face. Blackbeard's character was the same as it would be in the future, cruel and cunning, and extremely arrogant, but one thing was undeniable. He did have some cleverness. Every time he could go in front of others, as if he was predicting the future, and lead all events to his own situation. But now it didn't work on Madara, or Dushless, who manipulated him from behind. Less than 1/10 of the original power? Do you think I'm a novice? This kind of trick can only fool those rookies who have just started. Hearing this, Blackbeard was like a cat whose tail was stepped on, growling at Madara gloomily. 10% of the power is enough to tear the ground. Isn't it easy to disintegrate a mountain with 100% of the power? It's no wonder that Blackbeard questioned Madara so much. It's still unknown whether Whitebeard can do that. How can you, and nobody, do it? Do you think I'm an idiot? Madara was silent and too lazy to explain. Hundreds of millions of pores opened all over his body, and the dense chakra erupted. The blue light instantly spread all over Kansusanu's body. The previous subtle cracks were immediately repaired. Not only that, but the back of the head and the armpits under the shoulders were trembling strangely, as if something was going to break out of the shell. Is it? Seeing this scene, Blackbeard's old face changed greatly, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He smelled an abnormal scent of danger, and looking at the faintly condensed outline of the head, he had already guessed what it was. He wanted to dodge and retreat, but it was already too late. Blue rays of light poured down, and Blackbeard, who was caught off guard, was lifted into the air. Looking up, Kansusanu, who was just a head and 2 hands, changed dramatically at this moment, and turned into 2 heads and 4 arms. Blackbeard was caught by the new arms, and he could not move. He was casually caught in the hands of Madara, and he was dizzy. Madara's eyes looked at Blackbeard playfully, and he smiled. Even if he didn't mean to laugh, Blackbeard's eyes were full of irony. Chapter 598. Blackbeard struggled hard, and the violent twisting made his old face red. His eyes were as sharp as a knife, and the cold light was like a knife, which made people unable to look directly at him. His eyes were more ferocious than that of a beast, which showed Blackbeard's ruthlessness. His eyes were glowing with a strange green light. At this moment, Blackbeard was terrible. He was no different from a ghost who had escaped from hell, full of indescribable madness. Being caught like a flea in someone's hand was a serious blow to Blackbeard's self-esteem. Despite the defense of armament hockey and being caught by Kansusanu's powerful fingers, Blackbeard didn't feel any pain, but the mental blow was unparalleled. It was far more painful than the physical blow, and Blackbeard's steel heart almost melted. For the first time in his life, he was so frustrated. His arrogant self-esteem was ruthlessly crushed by Madara, and the mental blow was far more painful than the physical pain. For many years, Blackbeard had been secretly provoking everything, like a fisherman overlooking the development of the whole war. Only this time, he was crushed by Dustless like an ant, and it was difficult to make him pay attention to himself. An unprecedented unwillingness invaded his mind from all corners of the body along the meridians of the whole body, and Blackbeard's struggling strength suddenly increased a lot. Oh, it's rare for a person like you to talk about self-esteem. Noticing the powerful force coming from his right arm, Madara's eyes rippled, and he was slightly surprised. He used to think that Blackbeard was a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. From this humiliated expression, this old guy still has dignity. With a slight thought, Susanoo raised its arm high and threw Blackbeard away as if he was a piece of garbage. Boom boom boom, under the unprecedented impact, the ground suddenly burst open, and a huge pit appeared. Blackbeard was lying in it with blood all over his body. Cough! Blackbeard's face was blue. If it wasn't for the defense of armament hockey, perhaps he would have turned into a pool of flesh and blood. Even so, he was still heavily injured. A few of his ribs were on the verge of shattering. If this continues, he will die for sure. Do you know the difference between you and red hair, Blackbeard? In Kensusanu, Uchiha Madara, who was controlled by Dushless, said coldly, I mean, do you know why Akagami has Houshiku Haki, but you don't? Blackbeard's face turned even darker when he heard this. Dustless's words were like a sharp thorn that pierced deeply into his heart, awakening the pain and unwillingness that went deep into his bones. He always thought that he was better than Red Hair Shanks, but Red Hair Shanks had Houshiku Haki, and Blackbeard did not, which was a fact. Don't be confused, because it's natural. Akagami is a person who dares to risk his life and has the qualifications to become a king's aptitude, and you are just a scoundrel who only knows how to play some irrelevant tricks. It's impossible for a person like you to have Houshiku Haki. Uchiha Madara, who was controlled by Dushless, said sarcastically, full of contempt and disdain. Ha ha ha. You don't have to be sarcastic, I won't fall for such a ridiculous trick. His rough arm wiped the blood stains from the corners of his mouth, and Blackbeard smiled with relief. He laughed at Madara's words, and his forthrightness was also one of his contradictory characters. You won't live long anyway. Looking at Surd, whose breath completely disappeared on the ground, Blackbeard's eyes flashed with cunning and hesitation. He looked up and stared at the large Kansusanu. His soul trembled, his eyes flashed with fear, and his hesitation instantly turned into determination. Goodbye. Using all the strength in his body, Blackbeard, who saw that the situation was not good, flashed and fled. After a wave of smoke and dust, he disappeared forever. In just the time of a few breaths, his entire person had disappeared without a trace. Calmly staring at the disappearing black light, Madara was expressionless and did not choose to pursue. He stood quietly in place. White Zetsu. After a while, Madara opened his eyes and shouted. The moment Madara's voice fell, White Zetsu strangely drilled out of the ground. After looking around the messy battlefield, he asked helplessly, why did Dustless Sama deliberately let that kid go? Isn't it better to get rid of him now? Hearing this, Madara just glanced at him casually and did not explain. There was no need to kill a worthless person, and he didn't have the leisure to waste time. Pointing to Surd, who was lying on the ground in a coma, he seemed to think of something, and a strange smile appeared on his face, and then he ordered White Zetsu, this kid is a good chess piece, keep an eye on him. Although he was puzzled, White Zetsu nodded and walked towards Surd and swallowed him. Bastard, there is such a powerful fruit in the world. What a bullshit dark fruit, tremor fruit, gura no mi, is not worth mentioning. On the stormy sea, Blackbeard waved the oars with both hands and quickly rowed toward the stronghold of the Whitebeard pirates. The distance was not very far, and it only took one night to get there. Blackbeard yelled. He had to say that after the battle with Uchiha Madara, he knew that although Whitebeard was powerful, he was not at the top level. His cruel eyes were also full of undisguised greed and covetousness. He had already classified Kansusanu as some kind of mysterious devil fruit. Compared with the so-called tremor fruit, gura no mi, and dark fruit, Kansusanu is beyond imagination. Whether it is defense or destruction, it has reached the realm of perfection. Blackbeard, who is greedy by nature, naturally desires this fruit ability. Chapter 599. It's no wonder that Blackbeard is so excited. He found an ability more powerful than dark fruit and tremor fruit, gura no mi. Of course, his heart is no different from being injected with chicken blood. The reason why he couldn't wait to get the dark fruit was because of his special body structure. Furthermore, the dark fruit's ability was strange and evil. It was tailor-made for him. When combined, it would produce an incredible effect. Blackbeard and dark fruit fuse together and have the power to turn something rotten into something magical. At that time, everything impossible will become possible. When I get dark fruit, I will occupy all of you and seize your power for my own use. Ha ha ha. Arrogant and ambitious laughter resounded through the dark night sky. Blackbeard rowed the boat harder. He can't do it, but it is possible with the power of the Whitebeard pirates. The next morning, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright and cloudless. Dustless and Garp's battleship moved slowly. Their destination is Marine headquarters. Although the way of transmitting news in this world is as slow as a turtle, the transmission of some important information is unimaginably fast, even faster than the three-dimensional world where Dustless lived before. Good things don't come true, bad things come true, those guys. On the deck, bathing in the warm sunlight, Dustless looked at the newspaper in his hand with interest. The color pictures of him crushing the pirates almost occupied the entire newspaper picture. The words, Marine Honorary Admiral, were marked on it. This is not bad news, you are already famous. Garp came over and ate the shellfish as usual. He also shouted about breaking the record. Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This old guy always appears in such a funny way. Winking at Wu Qin, Garp smiled boldly. The forced smile on his old face looked particularly strange and full of other meanings. No matter what, Wu Qin could no longer hide behind the scenes like in the past. He could no longer be completely exposed under the sunlight and have nowhere to hide. Shrugging, Dustless smiled, and no longer entangled. This kind of blessing and misfortune are interdependent. Even if his identity is exposed, it will be much easier to do things in the future and he will not encounter many inconvenient obstacles. You are the only admiral in the Navy at present. Garp's tone was full of envy and jealousy as he tasted the scallop in his hand. Dustless had risen to the heavens in a single step and been conferred the title of a great general. Even if it was just an honorary great general, without the slightest authority, this was still unprecedented. In the Marine, many people who have worked for 40 or 50 years are only at the rank of vice admiral. There are only a few admiral positions and they have long been divided. Dustless changed the history of the Marine. Of course, it can also be understood as the special treatment of the celestial dragons and his bottomless strength to be able to hold this position. Who told you to refuse the promotion? Otherwise, about 10 years ago, you should have been an admiral, the same period as Sengoku and Z. Dustless looked at Garp with deep meaning, and said with admiration. Being an official from 1,000 miles away was only a name. A person like Garp who was willing to abandon a general was worthy of the 4 words lofty and lofty. After sitting on the admiral, can I still eat scallops like this? Garp happily ate the scallop and didn't take it seriously. Fame and fortune were nothing but fleeting clouds to him. They were dispensable. By the way, your Marine headquarters will soon promote the 3 of them to admiral. The thread of conversation suddenly turned and Wu Qin asked quietly. The 3 people in his mouth are naturally Kazan, Akiji, Sakazuki, Akainu, and Borsellino, Kizaru, the 3 future admirals. Hearing this, Garp suddenly stopped eating and then nodded seriously. He didn't hide it and said bluntly, this is the meaning of Sengoku and those 5. You can be promoted to admiral, the 3 of them are also decades old, why can't they? Garp stared at Dustless and smiled. Dustless's qualifications can be ignored, but he still ascended to the position of admiral. Kazan and the other 2 are also veterans of the Marine, and they have been in the position of vice admiral for many years. Their qualifications are far above Dustless, and their strength is comparable to an admiral, so they can indeed go further. This is also true. Dustless nodded slightly. Although these words are unpleasant to hear, it is true. The identity of an honorary admiral of the Marine was suddenly exposed. For the whole world, it was like a rock falling into the sea, splashing huge ripples. Some people who didn't know the truth even laughed and ridiculed that the Marine used this to keep up appearances. Dustless's skin was white like jade, his facial features were exquisite, and there was an indescribable noble aura between his eyebrows. At first glance, he looked like a noble son of a wealthy family. Only some big pirates who knew the truth behind the scenes were worried about the future. I said that the back of the honorary admiral was familiar, but I didn't expect it to be him. On an island in the East Blue, red-haired Shanks, who was driven out of the New World by Dustless, whispered to himself, his face full of caution. Before, Dustless was just hiding behind the scenes, but now he suddenly jumped to the front, which means that there will be more head-on confrontations in the future. Shanks felt stifled in his heart as he recalled Dustless's earth-shattering strength. His originally optimistic state of mind suddenly became dispirited and dispirited. His face was as pale as paper. To him, Dustless was an unforgettable shadow. They were sent by God to fight to the death with the pirates. New World, an island once occupied by Bigga's mom. The sky was cloudless, and the sun was infinite, nourishing the devastated earth, and everything was full of vitality. Only the Whitebeard pirates were a different scene. "It's that damn kid again," on the sea, looking from a distance, the whole battleship was trembling slightly, the sky was gloomy, and the oppressive atmosphere of Whitebeard was changing the natural environment. Blackbeard has reported all the situation to him, and all the dirty water has been poured on Dustless, the honorary admiral of the Marine. Chapter 600. Whitebeard's powerful hands grabbed the newspaper, and his beard was raised in a straight line. His whole body was covered with some kind of mysterious power, and there was a clearly visible blood net in his eyes. Buzz, after a while, there was a violent restlessness in the air, shrinking at an incredible speed, forming a circular air cover, converging between Whitebeard's hands. You can hear the miserable sadness in the void, full of begging for mercy. "Dad, this is the Moby Dick. If you hit it, it'll be finished." Marco, the immortal bird, hurriedly advised. Whitebeard is such a person. He never hides and suppresses his emotions. He hates conspiracies and tricks. He likes to be straightforward, and his temper is the same. The corner of Marco's eyes revolved around Blackbeard. Although Blackbeard's explanation is reasonable, the doubts in Marco's heart are difficult to erase. Even though Blackbeard gave people the impression that he was a simple and honest person, very sunny and helpful, he gave people the feeling that he was a vicious viper lurking behind the scenes. When he opens his fangs and reveals his crimson tongue, the prey he aims at is already in the bag. At that time, it means that everything is already too late. All in all, even if the explanation is reasonable, it can't dispel the doubts in Marco's heart. Marco can only say that it's intuition why he doubts Blackbeard so much. At some point, Blackbeard is more like the natural enemy of the Whitebeard pirates. His sharp claws are all restrained by him, exposing only a harmless appearance. "Oyaji, I suggest that we immediately chase down the Big Man pirates, grab the dark fruit, and avenge the dead Thatch." Thatch's death cast a dark cloud over the entire Whitebeard pirates. Blackbeard's face was full of tears, and the corners of his eyes were wet with crystal tears. His miserable and painful expression was more sad than the death of his parents. "Yes, damn Big Mam, let's fight them to the end. Avenge Thatch, let them know the consequences of offending the Whitebeard pirates and become the first, Yonko, for emperors, to be removed. Kill them all." Blackbeard's rapid speech was recognized by all the members of the Whitebeard pirates. All of them immediately became united against a common enemy and shouted to join forces to kill the Big Man pirates. Seeing this scene, Marco frowned. It was a good thing that the entire Whitebeard pirates were united, but the wind seemed to be blowing in the wrong direction. Even if you want to take revenge, you have to find the honorary admiral. He is the enemy of the same family. Surd's death has nothing to do with Bigga's mom. Marco stared at Blackbeard in confusion and asked. The understatement suddenly extinguished the enthusiasm of the Whitebeard pirates, and everyone's indignant expressions were all solidified and they became sluggish again. All the crew members looked at Blackbeard, waiting for his explanation and reasoning. Seeing this, Blackbeard's old face suddenly twitched. His expression was particularly gloomy and frightening. After being asked by Marco, he was really speechless. His ugly expression was the same as if he had eaten 10 pounds of flies. As for the reason. **T reason. This was originally the reason why he used the power of the Whitebeard pirates to rob the dark fruit, but he made it up on the spur of the moment. Damn Marco, when I get the opportunity, I will kill you like I killed Surd and let you understand the consequences of going against me. Blackbeard swore in his heart. Every time he was complacent, there were always 2 annoying flies jumping out to hit his face, and he was unable to refute. Only after getting the dark fruit can we increase our battle power and find that man for revenge and have more confidence. His eyes lit up. Blackbeard, who had been wandering the sea for half his life, was not immortal. He hesitated for a few seconds and said indignantly to Marco. Even though it was just a made-up reason, it left Marco speechless. As Blackbeard said, only by injecting fresh blood into the Whitebeard pirates can this almost decaying battleship rebloom with vitality and sail tenaciously. This guy, Marco's face changed slightly. Even if he didn't like Blackbeard, he had to admit that he was indeed a wise man. It's a pity that his real heart belongs to the Whitebeard pirates, or is it a temporary lurk that is worth exploring? Opening his mouth, Marco was about to open his mouth to explain when Whitebeard's powerful shout resounded through the entire pirate group, shaking all the members such as Blackbeard and Marco for a while. The sharp sword in his hand pointed to the sea in front of him, and the sea covered by the sword was faintly in a state of collapse. Everyone, the almost blood-red pupil stared at the distant sea, and he seemed to see Bigga's mom drinking tea. The cold killing intent filled the entire sea, causing the sea to freeze exaggeratedly. Seeing this scene, Blackbeard's breathing became heavy, and his expression was full of morbid excitement. Just when he thought that Whitebeard was going to fight to the death with Bigga's mom, the next sentence directly sent him from the clouds to hell. Retreat! The roar of resentment and unwillingness resounded through the endless sky, and the lazy clouds in the sky were erased by Whitebeard's sorrowful cry. The sword in his hand slammed on the deck, and the Moby Dick trembled fiercely, and a wave swept up on the surface of the water and slapped towards the surrounding islands. All the members of the Whitebeard pirates were stunned, including Marco and Blackbeard. Sorry, Thatch, I can't take the entire Whitebeard pirates into the net. That guy may have personally weaved a big net for the Whitebeard pirates. People should have self-knowledge. Whitebeard was not an idiot. He knew what would happen if he rashly attacked Mariewa, where Dustless was. If the Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, join forces, I'm afraid that he will be killed in 100 moves or so. At that time, the Whitebeard pirates will also be able to catch a turtle in a jar, and this is still the case where Dustless doesn't do anything. Attacking Mariewa, this is a bloody and cruel war. No, this is not a war. The definition of a war is a war between the 2 sides. Attacking Mariewa is just an unequal massacre. It's just a unilateral annihilation. Chapter 601. The unilateral trampling and annihilation of the Whitebeard pirates may sound alarmist and appalling, but it is an undeniable fact. The world government is not as bad as imagined, and the Whitebeard pirates are not as powerful as imagined. So far, the only one who can fight in the Whitebeard pirates is the old Whitebeard. Everyone else is a rising star in the future, but they are still young and there is no one who can deal with the Marine Admiral level. On the other hand, the other pirates, Bigga Mam, Hundred Beast Kaido, and Red Hair Shanks. Although these people are not as good as Whitebeard, they are younger, especially Red Hair, who is only in his 30s, and there is still the possibility of infinite progress in the future. Hundred Beast Kaido and Big Imam are also younger than Whitebeard by 10 or even 20 years. Now Whitebeard's body is also going downhill, and it is getting worse day by day. Looking at it, there is almost no one who can support the Whitebeard pirates in the future. Thinking of this, Whitebeard felt sad and lonely. Even if Old Tiger's power is still there, one day his feet will step on the ground and his deterrence will disappear. At that time, the Whitebeard pirates will become food in the hands of countless jackals and wolves. "Father, aren't you a bit alarmist?" Marco whispered as he carefully approached Whitebeard. At the same time, he handed a large jar of white wine to Whitebeard. Hearing this, Whitebeard just glanced at Marco and didn't speak. He took the wine handed to him and poured it into his mouth. It seemed that this was the only way to relieve the depression in his heart. His beloved son had been killed, but he could only watch helplessly. It was easy to imagine how he felt. It's not that Whitebeard is afraid of death, but as a captain, he can't lead the entire pirate regiment into the tiger's den. Compared with the world government's headquarters like Mariewa, the marine headquarters is like a good wolf's den, and Mariewa hides all kinds of prehistoric beasts, enough to easily tear apart a hungry wolf. Alarmist. I also hope that I am sentimental. With a sigh, Whitebeard said hopefully. If time can go back, he will not listen to Roger's inside story. In fact, sometimes ignorance is also a kind of happiness. If he could, how he wished that he did not know some truths and was still the old Whitebeard. It was all that damn Roger's fault for telling him the truth. This caused him to become hesitant in everything he did. He had to consider the consequences of everything he did. Especially when this was only the strength of the world government. Behind the scenes, the celestial dragons who control the world are low-key lurking in the dark, invisible big hands covering the world, even the highest power in the world is just their lackey. Of course, these dogs were occasionally disobedient, and sometimes they would do things against the will of the celestial dragons. In fact, this was human nature. Once their wings had hardened, no one was willing to continue doing things without saying anything. The 5 honored stars were also ambitious people. It was obviously impossible for them to be silent lackeys for the rest of their lives. Are you referring to celestial dragons? With a flash of understanding in his eyes, Marco asked absurdly. It is well known that the celestial dragons are a group of idiots, and they are not even as good as normal human beings. Whitebeard didn't want to say more. These people are still too young and immature. Knowing some secrets will only make them feel desperate and lose their ambition. The celestial dragons are all idiots. What means did they use to unify the world 800 years ago? In today's world, what means did they use to make the 5 honored stars willing to crawl? Whitebeard is too lazy to explain these unknown secrets. If they know more, they may lose their motivation. In that case, the gains are not worth the losses. Throughout the New World, as well as throughout the 4 seas, people are talking about the new Marine Admiral. His reputation is also very different. Some people think that he is worthy of the name. After all, there are pictures in the newspaper of Dustless defeating the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates with overwhelming strength. Similarly, some people think that this is Marine's face. The reason is that Dustless is too young, he is only in his early 20s, but he became an admiral of the Marine. Although he is an honorary admiral, it is difficult to accept that he has no power. After a few days of bumpy sailing, Dustless and Garp finally arrived at their destination, the Marine headquarters, Marlin. The only thing that disappointed Dustless was that the old guy Whitebeard understood the meaning of watching the fire on the other side of the river. He led the entire Whitebeard pirates back to the island where they were originally stationed, and the hatred of Surd's fall was left behind. There is still a long time in the future, and Whitebeard also knows the simple truth that it is not too late for revenge. In the office that belongs to the Admiral. Dustless stood in front of the window, overlooking the Marlin surrounded by battleships. Below, there are countless Marines training, carrying out the necessary daily training. The one who trained the new recruits was the retired General Z. What is the movement of the dark fruit? Dustless whispered in the empty room. A dark shadow stepped out of the darkness. It was White Zetsu, who was all white. He reported truthfully, "It is still in the hands of Big Imam, but I am afraid it will not be long before it will be eaten by the subordinates." White Zetsu's face was very ugly. This is the strongest fruit he has tried his best to find. Now that it has fallen into the hands of Big Imam, this is a disguised enemy. That's for the best. Go and tell Hawkeye to try his best to retrieve the dark fruit. Otherwise, find a suitable opportunity to secretly kill the person who ate the dark fruit. A cold light flashed in his eyes as Dustless ordered expressionlessly. No matter who it is, he can't let Big Imam and Whitebeard benefit. Dustless's carefully planned trap will be in vain and become meaningless. White Zetsu nodded and then found the dark corner again and disappeared into the depths of the ground like a ghost. Chapter 602. It's too late to weaken the Whitebeard pirates and the Big Imam pirates. Dustless won't improve their overall strength in a disguised way. This is tantamount to digging his own grave. The whole world is so big. The second half of the new world is almost in the shadow of the Yonko, 4 emperors. If he wants to establish a foothold in the new world, the first thing to bear the brunt of is the pressure from the Yonko, 4 emperors. Only by dealing with them can he be at ease to dominate the world. Knock knock knock. While pondering, there was a sudden knock on the door, and Dustless's thoughts were pulled back. "Come in." Creak. The door was gently pushed open and a tall, strong man with a white face and a handsome appearance appeared in front of him. He gave people the feeling of sunshine, confident and gentle. But what makes Dustless most concerned is that he actually knows this person. "Your name is Smoker?" Glancing at him, Dustless asked calmly. Smoker was stunned when he heard the words and his face showed a surprised expression. He was flattered. He didn't expect Dustless to know him. Now he is just a basic soldier. He has no rights. He is just a cannon fodder in the war. Dustless, on the other hand, was a serious general. The difference between them was like heaven and earth. Recognizing him at a glance, Smoker's feelings were abnormally strange. "Exactly." He raised his chest and saluted. His tone was neither servile nor overbearing. It was vigorous and loud. His figure was tall and straight like a javelin. His heroic spirit flourished and he had an imposing appearance. This guy is a talent. It is not impossible for him to become an admiral in the future. Seeing this, Dustless gave him an appreciative look. People can't be arrogant, but they can be proud. Smoker is young, but he can do this very well. Take it. Throwing the devil fruit with strange lines to Smoker, Dustless explained, "This is Logia's smoke fruit. After eating it, the host can turn into smoke. You are lucky. This is what Garp and I encountered a pirate group on the way back." Smoker's eyes widened. He didn't expect to meet Dustless for the first time and give him such a valuable gift. The Logia devil fruit was priceless. It was priceless. You might not even be able to buy it with money. There's no need to thank me. This devil fruit is just a burden in my hands. It can't be used. Besides, it was Vice Admiral Garp who robbed it. It should belong to the Marines. Dustless said indifferently. The ability of the smoke fruit is good, but Dustless has no use for it, not to mention that this is only temporarily given to him by Garp. Now that he has given it to the Marine, it can be considered as returning it to its rightful owner. "What did you call me here for?" Dustless asked as his gaze fell on Smoker's face. His sluggish eyes quickly converged, and Smoker sorted out his thoughts. Sengoku wants to see you. As for the reason, speaking of this, Smoker's tone stopped. Now he is just a small soldier, and he is still too far away from spying on the confidential identity of the Marine's high-level officials. The weasel paying a New Year's greeting to the chicken is not good. I guess it's about Doflamingo. After thinking for a few seconds, Dustless secretly guessed and faintly understood the intentions of Sengoku. Among his forces, only Doflamingo, a mad dog, is stirring up trouble everywhere. There is no wall in the world that doesn't leak, and the chance of deceiving the world without anyone knowing is zero. In particular, Doflamingo used the birdcage on the entire Dressrosa, but even so, Sengoku is not qualified to interrupt. Shichibukai can plunder the world and not be wanted by the Marine, which is guaranteed by the 5 Mariewa. Suddenly finding Dustless, it is estimated that he wants to stop Doflamingo's actions from him. Knock, knock, knock. A dull knock on the door sounded. Sengoku raised his eyebrows slightly, and immediately said, "The door is not locked, come in." Raising his eyes, he saw Dustless. Sengoku's old face suddenly flashed with surprise. He didn't expect Dustless to be so rule-abiding. At first, he thought that Dustless would break the door like Garp. After all, Dustless's strength is not lower than his, and his status is not lower than his. Overall, his data completely beats Sengoku, and he can be so rule-abiding is completely giving him face. Dustless's next sentence suddenly made Sengoku's slightly smiling old face collapse. His face was full of bitterness and wonder, and his heart was replaced by a haze. After you became the fleet admiral, the 4 seas were calm, and the New World's imposing pirates made peace. The recent Yonko, 4 emperors, also quietly retired. The name of Fleet Admiral Sengoku has spread to all corners of the world, and the world is talking about it. Dustless's compliment did not make Sengoku happy, but his face was gloomy. During his promotion to the Fleet Admiral, Impel Down was exploited one after another, and the same was true for the Marine headquarters. The most fatal was the recent emergence of the deformed organization, Shichibukai. All of this has brought his reputation as a fleet admiral to the peak. Of course, it's not a song, but a curse. Every day, the citizens who have been tortured by the war of pirates scolded him, and some even directly raised several grades in succession. Sengoku was too lazy to scold him, and he gloriously expressed his condolences to his family. Sengoku also pinched his nose and recognized all this. He had to admit that this era is definitely the most chaotic era in history. Everywhere in the 4 seas, the Yonko, 4 emperors, are rampant, and the admirals of the Marine headquarters are in a state of fault. As a last resort, the evil organization Shichibukai was established to suppress pirates with evil. In addition, and in front of him, the celestial dragons who are currently extremely powerful and eat both black and white, Royce South. His head hurts, his chest hurts, and his whole body hurts. When he thought of it, Sengoku was speechless for a while, and his heart was full of resentment. It was obvious that the enemy was in front of him, but he could only endure it. Not only that, but he also had to squeeze out a smile to accompany him. He could only eat losses. He was often slapped in the face by the man in front of him. The depression in his heart can be imagined. The Gorosei, 5 elder stars, often called and scolded him, which made Sengoku's spirit collapse, but he could only suffer in silence. Chapter 603. It's no wonder that Sengoku is so gloomy. The enemy is close at hand, but he is helpless. Instead, he is full of smiles, for fear of angering the celestial dragon in front of him and releasing the mad dog Doflamingo to harm the world, not to mention the powerful aura of the celestial dragon. Now there is the identity of 7 warlords of the sea, and his master Dustless secretly protects him. There is really no one who dares to trouble Doflamingo. This kid is now free and unfettered. The only one who can restrain him is Dustless. Of course, after Doflamingo committed crimes, in the end, the black pot always needs to be carried by someone else. The bitter candidate is only Sengoku. It's no wonder that the marshal can't lift his head in front of Dustless. Doflamingo, the mad dog, is a big guillotine. If you have something to say, just say it. Dustless's words made Sengoku see hope and his face was full of joy. But before Sengoku could be happy, Dustless's sudden words once again put him in the 18th layer of hell. Listen or not, it depends on my mood. Dustless shrugged and smiled casually. Sengoku's face turned red when he heard this, and his lips trembled with anger. Dustless's playful eyes made him twitch all over, and his forehead was full of black lines. It's really uncomfortable to be hit head-on like this, but he can only endure it. For a while, he even wondered whether he should talk to Dustless. This is no different from asking for humiliation. After taking a few deep breaths, Sengoku calmed down. Doflamingo has blocked Dressrosa. His ability is quite strange. Den Mushi can't communicate with the outside world. It is no different from the closed dead island. It has become an independent world. Sengoku said worriedly. Since knowing the identity of Doflamingo's Tenryubito, Sengoku knew what his intentions were. Taking advantage of the situation to take back the throne that was given hundreds of years ago. The marshal means? Dustless asked calmly as he sat on the sofa. The cells in his mind accelerated, and in just a few seconds, he guessed Sengoku's intention. At the moment, he just shook his head disapprovingly. If he wants Doflamingo to give up his dream, it's better to cut him with a knife. This was unrealistic and unscientific. If I'm not wrong, his goal should be Dressrosa's throne. I hope you can stop him. His awe-inspiring eyes fell on Dustless, and Sengoku said in a deep voice, he is now one of the 7 warlords of the sea, and King Dressrosa is useless to him. He is an evil pirate, and I am a righteous marine. How can I stop this? I'm not familiar with him, and we're sworn enemies. Dustless chose to be perfunctory and play dumb. Dustless was the mastermind behind the scenes who encouraged Doflamingo to seize Dressrosa. Now, it was impossible for him to ask Doflamingo to give up the cooked duck. It would be a pity to let it fly in vain. As for the royal family of Rico, go play with the mud where it's cool. Youth, Sengoku's pupils widened when he heard this, and he looked at Dustless incredulously. He didn't expect Dustless to be so shameless. Doflamingo was not known to everyone, but Marine's high-level officials and Gorosei, 5 elder stars, knew it clearly. Opening his mouth to refute Dustless, Fleet Admiral Sengoku suddenly found that he was speechless. To catch a thief, everything must be paid attention to the real evidence. Although he was convinced that Doflamingo was Dustless's dog, there was no substantial evidence to prove it. Moreover, falsely accusing a celestial dragon is not a small crime. Even if Dustless quibbles, Sengoku can't argue. He can only stare. Gorosei, 5 elder stars, will not be bored enough to testify for him. It's obviously nonsense, but it makes people speechless. This guy is shameless. Sengoku asked himself that he had never seen such a shameless person. Although Whitebeard was barbaric and unreasonable, at least everyone could retaliate. With Dustless, this rule that everyone abides by is invalid. Only he can play at will. The most terrible thing is that he can't fight back, he can only passively take the moves. I think, looking at Sengoku, Dustless said, everything has 2 sides. Although Doflamingo's strong invasion has brought great losses to Dressrosa, there is also a positive and optimistic side. Dressrosa is the second stop to enter the New World. After entering the New World, most pirates will come to this island to resupply equipment and provisions, as well as some necessities for sea navigation. Therefore, the public security is extremely chaotic. Pirates, big and small, are constantly coming in and out. The so-called Liku royal family is just a laughing stock. They are regarded as heir by those powerful pirates. After the pirates landed on the island, they naturally began to rob. The weak people can only be slaughtered. The so-called fairy tale world is just based on humiliation. Perhaps many flamingos sitting on the king of Dressrosa will do no good, but at least pirate robbery can be effectively eliminated. No one dares to ignore the existence of Shichibukai, a super fighting force. About half an hour later, Dustless took a sip of tea and slowly finished this long paragraph. This is also, seeing that Dustless was going to talk nonsense again, Sengoku's mouth was twitching, and he was speechless by Dustless's rhetoric. In the end, he had to admit that this was an undeniable fact. Even if his heart was extremely uncomfortable, he had to admire Dustless's eloquence. It was obviously a reversal of facts, but Sengoku could not find a reason to refute Dustless's point of view. As Dustless said, it was because of the soft rule of the Liku royal family, which also led to the naivety of the local islanders. When facing pirates, they showed their weak side and were oppressed. In the face of the new King Doflamingo, of course, they dare not be presumptuous. Unlike the weak Liku royal family, Doflamingo, a bloody butcher, is the kind of person who advocates violence. He is not interested in soft prey. The more they resist, the more it arouses Doflamingo's interest. Unlike other pirates, as long as he can destroy the world, it doesn't matter what he does. Chapter 604. It's no wonder that Sengoku couldn't refute it. In this world, there are only two kinds of people, either they are exploited or they exploit others. It's as simple as that. Seeing that Dustless didn't let go, Sengoku knew that the plan to prevent Doflamingo from becoming the king of Dressrosa had failed. The plan he had been brewing for several days went bankrupt because of Dustless's insistence. As one of the 7 warlords of the sea, he has to cooperate with Marine's combat staff. Just arrange Marine personnel near Dressrosa. Fleet Admiral Sengoku took a step back with hope on his face. But he was destined to be disappointed this time. Why is Dustless so troublesome to hide from Marine and the world government? He needs a quiet environment to create a peerless weapon like Pluton. Dustless can never agree with Sengoku. I'm a Marine, he's a pirate. If you think Doflamingo will agree, you can ask him. Sengoku, time flies, and in a blink of an eye, several days passed. Dustless's big ship sailed rapidly on the sea, setting off huge ripples that extended rapidly, and the water ripples swallowed the surrounding sea. On the deck, Dustless leisurely basked in the sun and enjoyed his afternoon tea. Sengoku, that old guy wants to keep me as a laborer, no way. Dustless proudly picked up the fruit in the delicate plate and stuffed it into his mouth. After hearing what Garp had done, Sengoku wanted to keep him in the Marine headquarters. In case Dustless came, this initiator would be an excellent fighting force. However, to his disappointment, the Whitebeard pirates not only did not move, but they also left and returned to the island where they were originally stationed in the New World, as if nothing had happened. Sengoku's view of Whitebeard has also changed. In his impression, the big thief who couldn't rub sand in his eyes and would seek revenge for the slightest flaw was temporarily as well behaved as a sheep. His sharp teeth and claws that could tear together were all restrained. Rumble. The den mushi on the table suddenly rang, and it was Hawkeye who called. Has the dark fruit been taken back? Before Hawkeye could speak, Dustless asked first. Hawkeye shook his head. I was a step too late. When I arrived at the scene, only the skin of the devil fruit was left. The fruit in his mouth was sprayed out. Wu Chen was stunned for a while. When did Hawkeye become so humorous? After thinking of the person who ate the dark fruit, a chill flashed in his eyes. He asked calmly, Don't worry, we just have to kill that person. But then again, Baigu Mamu is willing to give the dark fruit to someone else. Who is it that she likes? The dark fruit was not something that could be found on the streets. In the past, even a flame fruit could cause countless pirates to fight over it. It went without saying that the dark fruit, which was dozens of times more precious than it, would cause a huge commotion. Therefore, the user must also be a confidant of Baigu's mother. A guy named Baron Eggy, his strength is quite good. He is slightly stronger than the average Marine Vice Admiral. He is also very young. The most important thing is that he is a loyal dog of Baigu Mamu. Hawkeye said bluntly. Baigu Mamu's men are different from others. Strength is secondary. The key is loyalty. The Baigu Mamu pirates have more than 5 people who are stronger than Baron Eggy, but they are all ambitious. Maybe the dark fruit will be given to them in the next moment. The next second, a cold light flashed and a big sword cut towards Baigu Mamu. This kind of thing can be found everywhere in the cruel sea of the second half of the Grand Line. Kill the guy named Baron Eggy, so that even if he eats the dark fruit, it won't help. In the end, the Big Imam pirates are still drawing water with a bamboo basket. His eyes were cold, Dustless said coldly. What can be chosen by Baigu Mamu to welcome him is not heaven, but a cold and gloomy hell. It's just a small matter. Hearing this, Hawkeye confidently replied. This is extremely simple for him. He can easily kill Baron Eggy in just a few rounds. At that time, a new dark fruit will be born in some corner of the world. In the end, the final winner is Dustless. Whether it is Whitebeard or Baigu Mamu, they were all severely cheated once. Compared with the Whitebeard pirates, the Baigu Mamu pirates were much more miserable. More than 30% of the combatants were annihilated and Baigu Mamu herself was seriously injured. Although she also injured Whitebeard, she suffered more than Whitebeard in his prime. The title of the strongest man in the world, even Whitebeard will accompany him in the future, not to mention that he is still in the golden stage. When Whitebeard and Baigu Mamu fought, the Baigu Mamu pirates were doomed to be defeated. Due to Dustless's calculations, the New World's Yonko, 4 emperors, were hit hard. The Whitebeard pirates were the most intact. Although their combat power has declined, they still maintain their original state. The only thing that is worrying is that in the battle with Baigu Mamu, Whitebeard himself was inevitably injured. His body is not as good as before. The battle with Baigu Mamu was almost a battle of killing 1,000 enemies and losing 800 of his own men. As for the other 3 emperors, their fate was even more miserable. The Kaido pirates were hit by Dustless's Tensei Seismomai, and only a few elites in the entire fleet survived. Next is the Baigu Mamu pirates, who were lucky by the Whitebeard pirates and could only retreat in embarrassment. As for the Akagami, Red Hair, pirates, they received special treatment from Dustless and were the most miserable of the Yonko, 4 emperors. Especially the Vice-Captain Beckman, who also carried the notoriety of killing each other, quietly withdrew from the New World and is currently active in East Blue. Anyone who wants to join a group of cannibalistic pirates has to think carefully. Although Beckman was framed by Dustless, the photos that cannot be quibbled have spread throughout the New World. Chapter 605. A few days later, under the connivance of Dustless and the indifference of the Marines, there was no doubt that Doflamingo easily seized the position of the King of Dressrosa and regained the throne that belonged to the Don Quixote family hundreds of years ago. The incident also came to an end. Caesar also secretly lurked in Dressrosa from the island of the New World. A large number of materials collected before to build Pluton were also transported to Dressrosa through various secret channels. After removing the birdcage, Dressrosa was already in ruins. Smoke and beacons were burning everywhere. The usually clean streets were covered with blood stains and corpses were piled up like a mountain. It was like purgatory on earth, disgusting and nauseating. In addition, Dressrosa also had countless toys for free. Although the scene was extremely bloody and depressing, the indigenous people living in Dressrosa all regarded Doflamingo as a god and their eyes were full of respect. Just as Dustless told him about the plan, Doflamingo used the ability of the string fruit to control King Riku and the Riku royal family subordinates. They waved their blades and slaughtered the islanders. Doflamingo, who was used to being a villain, finally appeared in a righteous way to save the civilians who had sunk into the fire and water, gorgeously transformed into a savior. Red Hair Shanks's hatred for Dustless was deep in his bone marrow and penetrated his soul. How could he let go of the Black Hand who caused him to lose the New World and had to return to East Blue to recuperate? For Red Hair Shanks, who valued his companions, Dustless took away everything including his dignity. His friend Hawkeye Mihawk was instigated by Dustless. Beckman carried the notoriety of killing each other. The members of the former Akagami, Red Hair, pirates were all dead and they were forced to withdraw from the New World. Among the Yonko, 4 emperors, he was undoubtedly the one who hated Dustless the most. He couldn't wait to eat his flesh and drink his blood. Shanks, don't worry about it. Fame and fortune are nothing to a pirate. It doesn't matter to me whether I'm infamous or famous. Somewhere in East Blue, the Akagami, Red Hair, pirates stopped here. Beckman stared at the unwilling Akagami, Red Hair, Shanks and comforted him with a calm tone. Even though he wanted nothing more than to tear Dustless to shreds in his heart, he still had to endure at this moment. Hearing this, the red-haired Shanks clenched his fists even tighter, his knuckles cracking. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. The more Beckman behaved like this, the more he felt helpless and guilty. If he had defeated Dustless, he would not have ended up like this. Speaking of which, I heard that the next town is called Windmill Village. It is related to the Navy's hero, Garp. I heard that his grandson was adopted by the people in that town. Seeing Red Hair Shanks so obsessed with Dustless, Beckman changed the topic, hoping to divert his attention. Otherwise, Dustless might become Red Hair Shanks' nightmare. He had lost his adventurous spirit and was like a walking corpse that only lived for revenge. Garp. Hearing this, Red Hair Shanks' empty eyes regained their luster. His face flashed with surprise. In the Marine, he and Garp barely had some friendship. Unfortunately, due to the different positions of the two sides, they abandoned their prejudices against each other and may become drinking buddies. You mean Garp's grandson was adopted? Red Hair Shanks' eyes flashed and his gloomy expression disappeared. Beckman nodded slightly and immediately his face was strange. Garp's grandson was called Monkey D. Luffy, but the kid didn't seem to know who his grandfather was and always mixed with bandits. He also has a brother called Porkis D. Ace and a kid named Sabo who grew up with him. Looking at the red-haired Shanks, Beckman truthfully reported that because he was afraid of the Marines' ambush, before he came to Windmill Village, he had already sent people to inquire about the situation of the village, and by chance he heard about the deeds of Monkey D. Luffy and his two companions. Suddenly realizing something, Beckman said, "Shanks, you don't want to, how can I have such a dirty idea? I don't care about the life of a kid." Waving his hand to interrupt Beckman, Shanks took off the straw hat on his head and looked at it deeply. The reluctance in his eyes disappeared and his hesitation turned into determination. Beckman's expression was stiff and he had already guessed the intention of Red Hair. He was about to persuade him to give up the absurd idea when Red Hair Shanks' voice sounded. Captain Roger once said that, D's will, has a great relationship with that race. Tenryubito is called God, and D's will is the natural enemy of God. You might as well gamble, Beckman. For Dustless, Red Hair Shanks knew that he was not his opponent. Even if he fought for a lifetime, he may not be his opponent. He could only choose a powerful successor and gamble him in the next era. There is a D in the name, and he is the grandson of Marine hero Vice Admiral Garp. This is the most suitable. Ha! If Garp knows that I trained his grandson to be a pirate, his expression will be wonderful. In the dark, Red Hair Shanks seemed to have seen Garp gnashing his teeth in the future. Red Hair Shanks laughed heartily and his previous depression was swept away and he was restored to his usual optimistic appearance. Seeing this scene, Beckman opened his mouth but didn't speak. He shook his head helplessly and a relieved smile appeared on his face. As a pirate, you have to be straightforward. Being fearless is the true nature of a pirate. Little did he know that this scene was seen by White Setsu hidden in the dense jungle. It's a good plan, but unfortunately, it's just your wishful thinking, Red Hair Shanks. Glancing contemptuously at Red-Haired Shanks who was laughing boldly, White Setsu's face was full of disdain. He snorted disdainfully at Red-Haired Shanks. The human heart was something difficult to control. Dustless may not be able to control it completely, let alone Red-Haired Shanks. Hard work and perseverance were praiseworthy, but there were some people that even Cheong-chi would never be able to surpass in his entire life. This huge gap was not something that could be easily bridged, especially when he was counting on a little brat. Chapter 606. It was no wonder that White Setsu was so disdainful of red hair. That straw hat had an extraordinary meaning. It had already become a spiritual symbol. Red Hair Shanks suddenly used it as a wager, hoping to defeat Dustless in the next era. It was simply a fantasy. It is undeniable that the will of the last D may really be able to defeat the celestial dragons, but Dustless belongs to this category alone. Red Hair Shanks' ridiculous bet is meaningless. But this guy is really shameless. He actually chose Garp's grandson. I'm afraid that the guy will be furious when he finds out that his most valued grandson went to become a pirate. White Jew frowned and had a deeper understanding of the shamelessness of the red-haired Shanks. This is deliberately provoking the relationship between them. White Setsu couldn't help but look at Red Hair Shanks. This guy clearly knows that Luffy is Garp's grandson, but he deliberately does this. There are very few people with the will of D in their name, but they are not rare. In the New World, people with D in their name can occasionally be heard making waves. Whiz, whiz, while he was deep in thought, two black shadows whizzed over. White Setsu was stunned. Seeing the shadows coming from afar, he hurriedly dove down, but it was too late. His arms were already clamped down by a powerful hand. You should be helping that guy collect information. No wonder he can predict the future every time. A guy like you is really a master of collecting information. A dull whisper sounded in White Setsu's ears. Looking up, it was Red Hair Shanks and his deputy captain Ben Beckman. Both of their hands grabbed White Setsu's arms at the same time and subdued him. Damn, I was careless. His eyes stayed on the two and White Setsu scolded. Thanks to Dustless, Red Hair Shanks is now in a very awkward situation, but he is also one of the Yonko, 4 emperors. The 3 colors of Haki, Armament Haki, Haoshiku, Kenbenshoku, have reached the peak and his strength should not be underestimated. Spit out the information you have inquired in the past and I will let you live. Looking down at White Setsu without emotion, Beckman said coldly. Hearing this, White Setsu sneered again and again, and his eyes were replaced by sarcasm. Spit out information. Wishful thinking. He was created by Dustless. How could he betray him? In addition, according to the hatred of the Akagami, red hair, pirates for Dustless, even if they reveal information, they will be killed. You two are just dabblers, yet you want to defeat Master Dustless. You're Red Hair Shanks, one of the 4 emperors. I think you're more like a child who hasn't woken up yet. White Zu, who was determined not to speak, mocked them. Since they were going to die anyway, he might as well take the opportunity to mock them and collect some interest. Red-haired Shanks's eyebrows immediately turned gloomy. In the past, when he was ridiculed like this, or if it was someone else who ridiculed him, he would just laugh it off. But this time, the target was Dustless. He couldn't let go of the grudge with a smile. It was impossible for him to treat the death of his beloved crew member as air. "That is to say, you heard what we just talked about?" Beckman asked coldly with his eyes narrowed. At the same time, he had already sentenced White Zoo to death in his heart. He also hated Dustless very much, but as a vice-captain, everything must be solved rationally. If he relied on emotion alone, it was not impossible for red-haired Shanks to disappear long ago. Yes. Looking at Beckman's eyes, White Zoo admitted frankly. These two people both hated Dustless to the bone. Most likely, even in their dreams, they wished that they could dismember him into 10,000 pieces to vent their anger. When they were captured, White Jew was already prepared to be killed. The will of D is the natural enemy of God. Maybe, people with D in their names may be able to overthrow the world in the future. This is not denied by White Zoo. There are countless idiots in the celestial dragons. On the other hand, the people with D in their names are almost all dragons and phoenixes among men. I'm sorry, but my master is not in this category. You want to defeat him with D's nonsense fairy tale. It's just wishful thinking. It's ridiculous to use this to cover up your inner helplessness. White Zoo loudly ridiculed, and the end result is just death. It's not a big deal. What evidence do you have to say that guy is special? Boom. His eyes flashed with anger. Red-haired Shanks grabbed White Zoo and threw him on the tree, making a dull impact. Just a spy, a mouse that can't see the light, has such a good eloquence. That guy is surrounded by monsters. His eyes locked on White Zoo. Red-haired Shanks' face was indifferent, and the sword in his hand was unsheathed. The sword was covered with a cold light and pointed at White Zoo's head. He didn't expect that one day, in the face of an insignificant pawn, he would feel speechless. Dustless Master is also a celestial dragon, but he is different from that group of garbage. I advise you to wash your neck and obediently stretch out your neck for punishment. With a strange smile on his mouth, White Zoo sneered. Dustless is an outsider. He does not belong to the world in front of him. In the eyes of Dustless, these people are just a group of ignorant indigenous people. It's that simple. D's will is the natural enemy of God. As a visitor from another world, Dustless is naturally not in this category. The ridiculous idea of relying on D's will to defeat the celestial dragon is just a strange strategy produced by red-haired Shanks out of powerlessness. Poochie. The cold light passed through White Zoo's body and easily divided him into two. The unknown sword in his hand was skillful and cut iron like mud. At first glance, it was not an ordinary thing. Do you need to change to an island? Looking at White Zoo who was killed, Beckman suggested. Dustless's subordinates were all strange and unpredictable people. Whether it was their ability or strength, it was beyond imagination. Just like White Zetsu, who was spying for information, no one would have thought that there was such a strange existence in the world. No need, he has been killed, and the information can't be passed out. Looking at White Zoo's body, red-haired Shanks turned and left indifferently. He had made up his mind to lead Luffy to the path of pirates, and it was impossible for him to leave Windmill Town in a short time. Hey! It seems that I am too proud. About half an hour later, White Zoo emerged from the ground. The reason why he was locked by red-haired Shanks and Beckman was that he deliberately exposed his breath. Chapter 607. Mariewa. Compared to the red-haired Shanks, Dustless in the spacious luxury villa was like a god. Hancock rubbed her legs and from time to time, she passed 2 sparkling grapes to Dustless's mouth. The days were extremely comfortable. After a while, Dustless seemed to be aware of something special. His lazy eyes opened, and his dazed eyes became clear. He still had to distinguish between business and private matters. "Young master, you," Hancock saw this scene and was slightly stunned. When she was about to withdraw, Dustless's lazy whisper sounded in her ears. "It's okay, continue." Hancock nodded gently, and then obediently rubbed Dustless's legs. About a few minutes later, White Setsu emerged from the ground. Hancock was already used to this scene. White Setsu always appeared in such a mysterious way. She was used to it. Dustless's people were so mysterious. About the time it took to burn a stick of incense, White Setsu told Dustless all the moves of the red-haired Shanks. That brat's way of doing things is really vicious. Only he could think of such a vicious strategy of killing his grandson. Has he been forced to such a state? It's really hard on him, but this is not enough. Wu Qin said expressionlessly. His tone was calm. He had already expected this. A pirate is a pirate, and ruthless is their portrayal. Red Hair Shanks is actually a butcher whose hands are stained with blood. In his career as a pirate, he has defeated many pirate groups. It is because of those pirate groups that he has today's sky-high bounty and the status of a hero. Don't think that a pirate is so kind. When they are forced into a desperate situation, they will often show the darkest and coldest side of their heart. Monchi D. Luffy, the grandson of hero Garp. Picking up the red liquid on the table, Dustless's face swept with a playful smile, and then he drank it. There was still some red blood stains on the corner of his mouth. "Do you want to kill him now?" White Setsu said coldly. The so-called him is naturally Garp's grandson, Monchi D. Luffy. Hearing this, Wu Qin just glanced at Bai Zhu faintly and then shook his head resolutely. He was just a little kid. The effect he could play was negligible. There was no need to worry about him. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. Let red-haired Shanks be defeated by the cruel reality. As for the so-called D's will, the legend of God's natural enemy. Although he wanted to suppress the ridicule in his heart, he couldn't control it. The corners of Wu Chen's mouth curled up as he sneered. There were countless legends in the world, but the probability of them turning into reality was 0. But that kid thinks he can be safe if he escapes to East Blue. Dustless's face was cold, and the goblet in his hand instantly shattered. A flawless vicious plan suddenly formed. Even if red-haired Shanks escapes to East Blue, Dustless will tear off his arm. Waving his hand, White Setsu came over and listened carefully to Dustless's plan. After a moment of silence, White Setsu's face was strange, and he looked at Dustless with suspicion. Unlike before, instead of saying that it was a detailed plan, it was better to say that he took advantage of the opportunity. What made White Setsu speechless and unacceptable was that this time, the object of the use was a group of bandits. The dike of 1,000 miles collapses because of an ant's nest. The more unexpected the small character, the more likely it is to play a huge destructive role. Even if the enemy is a passerby, sometimes you need to be 120% alert. Seeing White Setsu's suspicious eyes, Dustless explained. There were so many examples like this that they could be counted as the grains of sand in the Ganges. In the future, Whitebeard and red-haired Shanks fell because of this. At the beginning, Z was the same. Because he thought that Dustless was a celestial dragon, which was synonymous with idiot, he saved Fisher Tiger from the fishman race. As a result, he was beaten by Dustless. Seeing Dustless's insistence, White Setsu didn't dare to say more. After all, it was Dustless who created him. He gently nodded and chose to obey Dustless's order. Then he sank into the depths of the ground and his aura disappeared. Just like what Dustless said, the more easily overlooked a minor character would be, the more unparalleled and unimaginable the destructive force they would display. "Master, why don't you just kill red-haired Shanks?" Blinking her watery eyes, Hancock asked puzzledly. Her enchanting little face was filled with curiosity. Her clean and delicate facial features revealed her dimples that caused people to daydream. Combined with her fresh and refined temperament, it made people unable to extricate themselves from her. She was more dangerous than a deadly poison. If the toy is dead, what fun is there in life? No matter what, he won't be able to escape the curse of fate. Since he's so fond of playing the savior game, I'll play with him to my heart's content. Dustless glanced at Hancock, his eyes clear, and said, "People like me hate people who think too highly of themselves. They can't face their own status. They always think that they are special and can do anything. I really don't know where he got this confidence from." Funny. At the beginning, Dustless didn't mean to fight against red-haired Shanks, but this kid repeatedly jumped out to destroy his plan. Especially the red-haired guy. Dustless was extremely tired of him. He always thought that God had arranged for him to be the savior of the world. He was omnipotent and could do everything easily. However, Wu Qin had changed his fate and changed his identity as the savior of the world. He had changed his identity as the savior of the world into the role of a clown. Master is also bad enough. Hancock sighed. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was the consequence of offending Dustless. He thought that death was the end of it, but in reality, he was gravely mistaken. He could neither live nor die. Only when the other party's spirit had collapsed would Dustless send him to heaven and throw himself into the embrace of God. Chapter 608. For Hancock's dumbfounded expression, Dustless just ignored it. Perhaps for Hancock, Dustless's ideas are too extreme and impersonal. Dustless never cares about what others think. Counting the world in front of him, Dustless, who has lived 3 lives, understands the truth of human nature better than Hancock. If you don't bully others, it doesn't mean that others won't bully you. Although Dustless is only 17 or 18 years old on the surface, Dustless, who has lived 3 lives, understands this truth better than anyone. The so-called dignity, in the final analysis, is fought with fists. Seeing Hancock's puzzled face, Dustless was too lazy to explain. After all, she has too little experience and doesn't understand the real indifference of human nature. Without his complicated life experience, it is difficult for Hancock to understand Dustless's pain. There are almost no people who can empathize with him. Master is right, but we can't be soft-hearted to the enemy. After a while, Hancock's face was firm and determined. In an instant, Hancock suddenly understood the meaning of Dustless. "It's good that you can understand." Dustless chuckled. She closed her eyes comfortably and hummed happily. Over time, Hancock's massage skills improved by leaps and bounds, and she grasped it just right. The whole person was like floating in the clouds, and the nerves that were usually tense were relaxed and extraordinarily comfortable. Hancock's next sentence made Dustless helpless. "If I had strong strength at the beginning, I wouldn't have been humiliated and captured by Mariewa." Hancock clenched her teeth and said indignantly. Dustless rolled his eyes when he heard the words, and these words were directed at him. He shook his head and didn't care about it. He also knew that Hancock's mistake was unintentional. It was true that if Hancock had strong strength at the beginning, she wouldn't have been kidnapped to Mariewa and become Dustless's slave. After following Dustless for a while, Hancock gradually realized the cruelty of reality. In this world, being weak is a sin, and the sky in the future is left to those who are prepared. Time passed quickly, and a few hours slipped away quietly between the fingers. It was almost evening, and the sunset on the horizon covered the entire Mariewa, and the earth was covered with a layer of golden and fiery red morning glow, which was beautiful. Of course, ignoring the miserable screams, Mariewa's golden color is even more beautiful. Following Dustless, Hancock's pretty face was pale, and her beautiful eyes looked at the villas behind her with fear, and then looked at Dustless who was walking leisurely in front of her. She took a deep breath and patted her chest. If she hadn't met Dustless, Hancock might have been the same as those slaves now. She would have been bullied and oppressed by the celestial dragons every day and night, suffering all kinds of inhumane treatment until she was tortured to death. Thinking about it made her feel scared. Her eyes couldn't help but look at the other side of Mariewa, where the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, and the office of the world government are sacred and inviolable. People who pass by from time to time will show indescribable decency. Do you think it's very contradictory? Wu Chen's deep eyes fell on Hancock's face as he asked calmly. Hancock nodded in fear and then fell silent. Mariewa is indeed so contradictory. On one side is the office of the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, and many departments of the world government, sacred and righteous, while on the other side is the residence of the celestial dragons. They live in the old era and are extremely evil. Torturing slaves and other shameful things are as simple as eating and drinking here. In fact, Mariewa is the epitome of the world, and it is also deformed. Dustless whispered softly, and in fact, the whole world works like this, not only Mariewa. No one can change everything. Let's go. Looking at Hancock's pale face, Dustless turned and left, and an unexpected figure suddenly entered his eyes. That guy, isn't that Borsellino, Kizaru? On the dock, Borsellino in a yellow striped suit came into sight, and Dustless said unexpectedly. Hesitating, Dustless walked over, and Hancock followed. Kizaru, who is nearly 3 meters tall, has a bitter face, and his expression is sluggish as if he is seriously ill. His eyes are dark, and from time to time, he flashes a rare light. Obviously, he is very upset. This is strange. Dustless's mouth raised a playful arc, and his pace was faster, and Hancock behind him also opened a distance. It is worth investigating what happened behind him that can make Kizaru show such an ugly expression. Kizaru's wretched old face drooped, and it was full of gloom, as if someone robbed his money and not only did he not return it, but also beat him up. Borsellino. The light voice entered his eyes, and Kizaru, who had his head down, looked up, and Dustless's figure came into view. Royce South, Saint. Kizaru's gloomy expression was swept away, and Kizaru's smooth tone was respectful. The identity of Tenri Yubito and Marine Admiral were enough for him to look up to. I heard that Kazan and Sakazuki, and you will be promoted to Admiral soon. Why did you suddenly come to Mariewa? Staring at Borsellino's battleship, Dustless frowned slightly. This battleship is obviously different from Marine's battleship. It belongs to the world government, or simply belongs to Vegapunk's scientific force. Vegapunk, that old guy, actually asked me to be his test specimen, and Fleet Admiral Sengoku has agreed. Kizaru's old face twitched fiercely, and his expression became more gloomy, and his eyes were gloomy enough to drip water. Dustless is one of his own people, and he did not hide it. Despite Vegapunk's repeated assurances, the scruples in Kizaru's heart were still difficult to dispel. It was like a white mouse being experimented on by Vegapunk, and no one could be relieved. Believe in Vegapunk's technology, even if you really die, he can bring you back to life. Dustless smiled. He knew that Vegapunk was interested in the ability of Kizaru's glinting fruit. At the same time, he suddenly realized that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. Chapter 609. The world is very big, and more than 95% of the area is the sea. Even if Dustless reaches out and sings again, it is impossible to cover the whole world with one hand. Therefore, if he wants to dominate the world, he must have a very large number of troops. Dustless didn't think of this before, but now after hearing what Borsellino said, Dustless also had an idea. Vegapunk, that old guy. I can talk to him about a business deal, that old guy shouldn't refuse. With a gloomy smile on his face, Dustless's eyes lit up. Dustless can order Vegapunk to hand over ordinary things, but confidential research documents are as difficult as ascending to the sky, and it may not be able to scare him. What's more, Dustless needs something that can't be seen on the street. According to Dustless's guess, the Gorosei will definitely stop him. What he wants is the essence of Vegapunk's lifelong research, the bloodline factor, which is the foundation used by the later generations of Doflamingo to create human-made devil fruit. Caesar once said that what Doflamingo stole was an incomplete part. It's impossible to get the complete information of Vegapunk's bloodline factor. Even if he wants to call it out, the 5 elder stars won't just watch the information fall into my hands. Dustless frowned as he remembered the conversation with Caesar in the Den Mushi a few days ago. According to Dustless's understanding of the Gorosei, they will definitely not be willing to give such an important thing to him, and they will definitely refuse it with various excuses. Since they can't do it on the surface, they can only obtain it secretly. Obtaining the bloodline factor can also indirectly create an army of devil fruits. In the future, Kaido will buy a large number of artificial devil fruits from Doflamingo and create the world's first artificial devil fruit army. Dustless can follow this method. His current subordinates are only Hawkeye and Doflamingo. Wanting to control the world with these people is tantamount to a fool's dream. The government's humanoid weapon project has been failing a lot recently. There is no suitable body to carry Vegapunk's experiments, so this hard job fell on me. Borsalino sighed and said dejectedly, "The undead army that attacked Mariewa last time made Vegapunk see the feasibility of the humanoid weapon plan. He wants to put my glint fruit on it. As a reward, the highest commander of the scientific force will be me." It sounded tempting, but the premise was that it was a success. Dustless can understand Borsalino's pain. He is a dignified vice-admiral, and he will be promoted to admiral at the same time as Kazan and Sakazuki. But now that Vegapunk had taken a fancy to him, it was self-evident how tangled he was. Borsalino couldn't help but envy Dustless. Dustless's ability was very similar to his, but Vegapunk only took a fancy to him. As for Dustless, Vegapunk probably didn't have the courage to ask. Vegapunk's experiments often fail. Focusing on the key words, Dustless asked blankly. In his impression, Vegapunk is the world's #1 scientist with countless geniuses. Although Caesar was the first to stand up and express his dissatisfaction, the fact is that he is not as good as Vegapunk. That's for sure, he is not a god, failure is natural, a strong mind of 500 years is nothing. Borsalino said with disgust. A vice-admiral of the Marine is about to be pushed to the operating table by Vegapunk. It would be strange if he was happy, and Vegapunk's failed works are also countless. Maybe Borsalino will also be labeled as a failure. There is no suitable human body to carry my glint fruit. Normal human beings are too far behind. At the very least, their physical strength must reach the level of a vice-admiral. Kazara's lazy tone was full of pride. Dustless heard this and nodded. He has used glint fruit for decades, and he knows the power of glint fruit better than Borsalino. If he wants to install some of the glint fruit's abilities on the humanoid weapon, he does need a suitable and strong body. In fact, there is someone who meets your requirements. Dustless's seductive voice sounded in Borsalino's ears, and the latter's eyes became cold, but soon dimmed, and his lazy tone was puzzled. I know 2 people can definitely. Mr. Z and Mr. Garp's body both meet that level, but they will certainly not agree. Borsalino's tone was unprecedentedly gloomy, and he said helplessly. You dare to think about it, Vegapunk doesn't have the courage to do it. Dustless said with unusual certainty. Vegapunk didn't dare to think about using the Marines, Hero, Garp and the former Admiral Z as an experiment, even though his status is high. He didn't dare to open his mouth. Not to mention Z for the time being, the hero Garp has become a symbol of the Marine. In fact, I can recommend a candidate. With his body's hardness, there is no problem for him to withstand Vegapunk's destruction, but I'm afraid there will be conditions. Dustless's words were like a life-saving straw, attracting Kazara's attention. It's normal to have conditions. When I became a lab rat, I also made conditions, otherwise, who would agree to this kind of experiment? Borsellino thought deeply. Become Vegapunk's test subject for free, what a joke. He wasn't that magnanimous yet. Borsellino also made conditions, that is, to become the highest officer of this force in the future, without any promise of reward, who would agree to be Vegapunk's test subject. The current meatball fruit ability user, the man who once had the title of Tyrant, the bounty of 296 million berries, is also one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Bartholomew Kuma. Dustless said bluntly, his tone was decisive. In fact, Dustless had secretly controlled Tyrant Kuma last time, and now he is his loyal dog. Thinking of the importance of the bloodline factor, which is more important, this Shichibukai is as light as a feather. If he loses a bear, he will get a group of artificial devil fruit troops in the future. After some calculation, Dustless did not hesitate to sell the bear. Chapter 610. The reason why Bartholomew Kumagotsi controlled him was entirely because this kid was looking for trouble. Now that he replaced Kumagotsi with the results of the bloodline factor, Dustless felt that it was quite cost-effective. Anyway, this Kumagotsi can't play any role, so it's better to use the waste. Make the best use of people, make the best use of things, and squeeze out your last value. This is also the necessary price to pay for attacking me. Dustless's face was as usual, and he didn't feel guilty. Being able to let Kumagotsi live until now is already a virtue of God. Bartholomew Kumagotsi. He can indeed take on this task. Borsellino's eyes were shining, and he sighed that this person was feasible. Before he joined the 7 warlords of the sea, Marine had a headache with Bartholomew Kumagotsi. Unlike other pirates, Kumagotsi has the name Tyrant and is extremely hostile to Marine. His nickname is from slaughtering Marines. Kumagotsi's abnormal physical defense is vivid in Borsellino's mind. His strange ability can bounce off all physical damage, and even human fatigue can be easily bounced off. He is definitely the most suitable experimental body to carry some of the abilities of the glinting fruit. As for his conditions, Borsellino whispered, and his wretched old face became normal. If Kumagotsi really chooses to be the experimental body of the world government's human weapon, then the conditions can be described as a lion's mouth, beyond imagination. The reason why you became an admiral should be inextricably linked to this experiment, Borsellino. While pondering, Dustless's wise whisper sounded in his ears. Borsellino was stunned, looked at his eyes, and then slowly nodded. It's a recognition of Dustless's words. The reason why he can reach the sky in one step is indeed related to this experiment. What is an admiral? It means that in the entire marine, from now on, only under the fleet admiral, above tens of thousands of people, not only needs the strength of an admiral, but also merits. The criteria for becoming an admiral can be roughly divided into 3. The most important is strength, followed by seniority, and in addition, there are personal merits. The 3 are indispensable. To put it simply, to become a great general, one still needs to have battle achievements. To become a great general, one must have achievements that can block the mouths of the people in the world. Only by becoming Vegapunk's test subject can Borsellino have a meteoric rise. This guy is very cunning. Even if Vegapunk's transformation fails, the tyrant bear will be the one to suffer, and he can stay out of it. Rubbing his head awkwardly, Borsellino said helplessly, Louis South, Saint, is really wise and frightening. He guessed my thoughts. As Dustless said, he did have such an idea. Even if it failed, it would only be Xiong who was going to undergo the physical transformation. If it failed, Borsellino would not be implicated. If Xiong did not join in, he might be the one who was going to undergo the physical transformation. No wonder he would make so many excuses. Maybe in the future, there will for Borsellino number 1. Borsellino number 2. He shuddered uncontrollably when he thought about it. Even if Vegapunk fails in the end, the Marine or the world government will not blame Vegapunk. Now Borsellino is just an insignificant vice admiral. Although he is dozens of times stronger than the average vice admiral, he is still far worse than Vegapunk. The world government and the Marine will still operate without Borsellino, and without Vegapunk and his inventions, they will fall into an unprecedented disadvantage. Now if Tyrant Kumagotchi joins, it will naturally be the best of both worlds. But will that guy really join the humanoid weapon experiment? It doesn't look like it. Thinking of Kumagotchi's hatred towards the Marine, Borsellino asked suspiciously. He is the one who hates the Marine the most among the Shichibukai. Dustless glanced at Borsellino and replied, "You have to understand that Kumagotchi is now one of the Shichibukai. In a way, he has already compromised. If he hates the Marine, he will not join the Shichibukai, and he will not shamelessly serve the Marine. You can ask him yourself." Leaving a light sentence, Dustless disappeared into the sky, and his breath disappeared without a trace. Hancock, who followed, saw Dustless leave and also left. This guy. I used to hear that his fruit ability is similar to mine, but I thought it was just a rumor. Now it seems that some of his abilities are very similar to the Glint fruit, and his ability to use it is much stronger than mine. Borsellino looked serious and exclaimed in his heart. There are legends about Dustless's fruit ability among the Marines' higher-ups. Most of the statements are consistent with Borsellino's Glint fruit ability. He thought it was fabricated, but today, not only is it true, Dustless's control of the Glint fruit is completely beyond his understanding. Do I need to ask him to teach me 2 moves? Forget it, he is not free, and I am not free. With a sigh, Borsellino didn't think much about it and quickly turned back to contact Kumagotchi of the Shichibukai. After all, it is a good thing to have a scapegoat. The night sky was particularly quiet and peaceful. Borsellino quickly contacted Kumagotchi, thinking that he would refuse his conditions on the spot. He didn't expect him to agree to participate in the experiment. And the condition is Vegapunk's secret research data, the bloodline factor. The bloodline factor is beyond the limits of Borsellino's rights. After some contemplation, for the sake of his life, he can only go to Vegapunk, the mad scientist. Hearing that Bartholomew Kumagotchi of the Shichibukai, Vegapunk agreed even more strangely and didn't even mention the word no. Not only was Borsellino not happy, but he also had an ugly expression on his face. He secretly scolded Vegapunk for being shameless. He felt abandoned. When there was no suitable experimental subject, he flattered him every day, but when there was Kumagotchi, he immediately put him aside. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.